welcome to episode 177 of Zapped to the Past. I am Adrian Mills. I'm joined as always by Mr. Graham Raddings. If you haven't listened before, this is a podcast where we discuss games that were released for the Commodore 64. Last week, we looked at our first batch of games from issue 72 of Zapped 64, which we are, of course, no way affiliated with, and were cheered mightily by CJ's Elephant Antics, caught dysentery with Dick Tracy, and suffered a 0-0 boring draw in League 2 with Gaza 2. This week, we continue our look at the games in April 1991, along with what was lighting up our TV screens that month. So, Graham, please tell me there's nothing that will give me nightmares like Dick Tracy did last week.
And so we continue our trundle along the C64 game backstreets of April 1991, only this time taking a slight detour down Oddball Avenue. And so in a month that also saw Intel release the lower-cost i486SX microprocessor, we grab our leather key fob, pull on our helmets, and dive into our fancy supercars as we head out with 20 like-minded racers in the C64 version of Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. And then head to the troubled 23rd century cities and blocks to dispense instant justice and avoid dangerous pizza slices in an all-new C64 version of Judge Dredd. Race games, platformers, run-and-gun shooters, all very familiar C64 game types for sure, but I feel something is missing. Maybe in the next lot, we'll finally be able to have some kind of ball-driven equine game. So while we wonder how any of that makes any sense, we head once again to the very familiar world of the C64 side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, this time as a bobbly multi-part monster in Saint Dragon. We then head to the horse races, or at least to the sideshow equivalent, where we toss balls to encourage equine acceleration in the weird Kentucky racing, before finally, as if that hasn't been weird enough, head to the discotheque rooms of a house on a quest to punch and grab flies and wasps in the downright bonkers Exterminator. Even for the arcade obscura. That's a weird old list of games, isn't it? It's always good to see varied ideas, though, making their way into game reality. I mean, who hasn't wanted to punch a digital wasp?
Please.
Mercifully, they don't come up very often, those Dick Tracy games, do they? Goodness, what a piece of shit that was. So no, but these are interesting times, and we'll see.
It's a rum old bunch this week. It's a rum old bunch.
April's been a bit of an odd thing. There's just, I don't know. I thought March was crazy, but some of these Dick Tracy came along and just parked everyone in the you're not as crap as me zone, didn't it? Yeah,
it's staked a claim, hasn't it? Staked claims that a double whammy, really, because it's a licensed catastrophe and a crap game.
It is, and what was interesting is that one of our patrons, I think it was AL82 Retro, yeah. He found an interesting article about it, which was the big Commodore format piece, because they did a retrospective on it, because it was the worst game in Commodore format history. That was the worst review they'd ever done, worst score they'd ever given. But inside all of that game, there's loads more sprite animations, there's loads more stuff. There's obviously much more game that was meant to be and that was released unfinished. Oh. So explains a lot, because there's loads more sprite animations and all sorts of stuff. They're all in there. They were just never used.
Wow. Okay, that's weird, isn't it? I mean, I get it sometimes, but normally you're pushed for space on the C64 with animations and sprites and stuff, and everything's of a premium. To have stuff in there that was never used.
It was never used because the developers said the developer was developing. They went, release the game now.
Oh,
so we released what was essentially not even a real version. It wasn't meant to be played. It wasn't even ready. But because Dick Tracy was so badly received by the critics, and because it wasn't doing very well, Disney wanted all things released quickly so that damage was minimized, because Dick Tracy flopped at the box office, didn't it? So
it did. Did you read that other story that they linked to as well? Our Patreon, I think it was Lee Dove, yes, where it's about Warren Beatty is just making strange Dick Tracy episodes and releasing them late night TV so he can keep hold of the license.
Such a strange world, isn't it? I can't believe that. Is that image of him like? And he didn't look well, but it just looked like this giant.
He looks like an 84-year-old man in a big yellow trench coat.
84-year-old Dick Tracy. I always wonder what Dick Tracy would look like when he got old, and now we know he looks like Warren Beatty. How weird is that?
It does, yeah. I mean, yeah, Warren Beatty is almost as old as Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy's a little shy of 100, so they're not too far apart.
I mean, I suppose there must be a part of him that sat looking at the recent Marvel and DC and all these comic book adaptations and gone, we should have been that successful. It had all the ingredients. It just didn't turn out to be the greatest cake, did it?
It did, but I remember watching Dick Tracy. It came back to me sort of thing, and I remember I feeling that it was just a bit of a rip-off of Batman at the time.
When I watched it, it wasn't like it was Batman. There was the stylistics of it were done in the comic book style.
Yeah,
but the problem was it was just incoherent. It was just incoherent gibberish. Nothing really happened. This crime, Dick Tracy runs in, solves it. This crime, Dick Tracy runs in, solves it.
He's always on the way. He's on the way. Exactly. He said it in the game.
And you think Goodfellas has got some quirky character names, bloody like Jimmy Two Times. Oh my lord, it's that film has got loads of them in it. Yeah. Harvey No Face and Buddy Two Cheeks and Limpy McGee. They're all in there.
Randy Forearms.
That's what they're like.
No one wants Randy Forearms.
And they all talk in that kind of gangster way. Hey, No Name, what are you doing with Two Face? I don't know. He's with Burger Cheeks. It's that honestly that kind of thing. I think there's a character in there called is it No Nose or something? There's loads of them. I think loads of them.
It's Muggsy come to life, isn't it? Hey Muggsy.
It is, and these are underneath all of these weird exteriors. You've got Al Pacino and people like that, and
Dustin Hoffman, yeah, and Dick Van Dyke somewhere in there.
Dustin Hoffman plays. I'm sure he plays a guy. Is he called Limpy Gary? I can't remember. I could have that completely wrong.
I think you might have. I really think you might have. Anyway, what we got this week? We've got 5 games this week. If you want to support the podcast, we'll put this up here. You can do that. We've got a Patreon, as you probably do know. You probably heard us say about it before.
Say it again. Say it again.
We'll say it again. It's patreon.com/Zapped to the past. Come and join us. We're having a bit of fun on there at the moment with AI generated C64 images, which is quite a good guessing games. Some of them have been really good. So I've been quite enjoying partaking in that. It's been a good laugh. We've got a Ko-fi.com/Zapped to the past. There's a shop, zappedtothepast.shop. We're obviously across all the socials. All the socials,
man.
All the socials. So find us on there as well and come say hello. We do like that. Now, obviously, and the other thing as well, I mean, obviously, the C64 is coming, we're all aware it's coming to a close and everything, and the Zapped magazines are running out and stuff, but the games are still here. We're still doing it, Come and join us. It's there's some interesting titles. We've still got 20 issues of the magazine still to get through, I think, or 19 because there's one missing, I think, or maybe. Yeah. But still lots to go through. And
there is
five games this week of interesting variety.
There is. I just wanted to say hello to a new Discord member as well, Mubar. So hello, Mubar. Just don't notice that he'd joined recently on the Discord, and they always come up on the welcome to and we give them a wave. But I just wanted to say hello. Thank you for joining the Discord. And if you are a patron and you do have, you do pay for the access to the Discord, you should join in. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in there.
You should indeed.
5 games, 5 glorious games. Ooh.
Indeed. Should we get into them?
Yeah.
Should we do what the listeners want and talk about these games?
I think it's time.
Let's do it. All right, let's get to that first one then. And our first one, interesting one. This is Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge.
Daddy.
£10.99 and from Gremlin Graphics. Those words might be enough to strike fear into your heart.
Ooh.
But this is, as I said, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. It's got a mighty 90%.
Heavy.
90. It's a sizzler, no less. And I'll put this up at the front. Probably the home of this is arguably the Amiga.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, where it was coded by Sean Southern and his longtime compatriot on visuals, Andrew Morris. They worked together on loads of stuff. But it was also ported to everything at the time, or most of the big machines around here at the time. So there was an SD version, Spectrum Amstrad, and of course the C64 version. No sword version, I noticed. I was quite disappointed with that.
Honestly, the support for that computer is lacking. Pull your finger out, time travelers.
And no GX 2000 or whatever it was called, the Amstrad cartridge thing. No port for that either.
Shocking.
What's going on? And I'd say these 8-bit versions are pretty ambitious, really, because at its heart, this is a split-screen racing game with up to 20 opponents. With 20 opponents in the race. All of which can be seen on screen and on the 16-bit at the start of the race. That's just quite, this is quite impressive on those 16-bit versions. And it runs at quite the clip, doesn't it? The Amiga version especially.
Yeah, the Amiga version is really good.
Yeah, impressive, very impressive. Yeah. And so that's no small ask for hardware. I mean, that's now nearly a decade old. Okay, what we're trying to do here. But attempt it they did, of course. The C64 version is coded by Ashley Bennett. Now, Ashley Bennett... he goes on to work on, this is his only game, I think, on the C64, but he goes on to work on loads of racing games, including Extreme G on the N64, Micro Machines, Outrun 2 and Coast to Coast on the Xbox and stuff, the TOCA series of games, Dirt 2, Forza 2, and Forza 4.
Does he only work on 2s?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Outrun 2, Dirt 2, Forza 2, 2 to the power 2, 4. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's done loads. He's still working in the industry today. So this was
only in 2s.
This was a start. Only in 2s. Yeah, he releases a game every other year, with a 2 in the title.
On the 22nd of February. Yeah,
absolutely.
He released 22 minutes past 10. Yeah,
he released loads of games in 2022. Loads.
Oh, unbelievable.
He was on a mission. Of course, it's a racing game. There's not much story to this. But the back of the box has this to say. Feel the thrill of accelerating from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds.
That's fast.
As you race head-to-head over hills, through valleys, and around vicious bends, gripping the wheel of your Lotus Esprit Turbo. Game features include 3D split screen, 1 or 2 player action, 32 courses across 3 different levels, 20 competing cars, multi-hazard turbo racing, refueling, and pit stop decision tactics. And at the bottom it says only Gremlin can do this. I don't know why it says that. Fair
enough.
I don't know. It's an ambitious and technically excellent 16-bit game being squeezed down into the 8-bit machines. That's not always a recipe for success that we've seen in the past. We've seen quite a lot of these big 16-bit games get a bit squashed and a bit there. But the game starts well. There's a decent intro sequence showing the various stats for the Lotus Esprit Turbo over a series of screens, including the performance, specs, dimensions, and a nicely drawn front-on view of the car. Good stuff. There's also a solid rendition. I thought the tunes in this pretty good. Solid rendition of the Amiga tune as well. Sounds really nice. Good sounds. But pressing fire loads the game up properly. And at that point, we get a nice title screen. It's got the Lotus badge. Same music we've heard. It's pretty decent. It's good front end. And pressing fire brings us a load of options to tailor our racing experience. So first up, you've got the difficulty. And this goes from easy to medium to hard. And the thing I liked about this is an impressive sort of thing, like it says in the back of the box, because this doesn't just change the speed and handling of the other cars, doesn't just make them harder or whatever. Now, this offers completely different tracks. So, as I know, the game has 32 tracks to race through, 7 in easy mode, 10 different tracks in medium, and another 15 different ones in hard. That's pretty impressive. And so this is exactly the same as the Amiga version. They've squeezed it all in. It is a multi-load, but we'll talk about that in a bit. You can also choose to play 1 or 2 players, so just click 1 or 2, and then you can tailor the details for each player as well. So that's quite nice. The 3 options under player 1 and 2 allow you to, if you move to the name, you can just delete the name that's in there. It says player 1. You just delete it and type your own name in. So that's quite nice and easy. Put your own name in, and then that name will appear in the high score in the results at the end of each race. You can change the gears from manual to automatic, and you can even change the control method from normal to alternative control. Now, normal control uses up and down for brake and accelerate, and left and right to steer. Okay, and you use up or down and fire to change gear up or down in manual mode. If you're in manual mode, that is.
Yeah.
Alternative uses fire button to speed up. You let go of it to brake, and left and right to steer with just up and down to change gear. I found this far more preferable. We've been saying this for a while to do this control method, I think. And it just works. It works much better. So once you've decided on your preferences, pressing fire allows you to choose from sound effects or 1 of 3 music tracks. Reminded me of Outrun. The way that Outrun does it, you've got the 3 different tracks. The tunes aren't as good as Outrun. They're not as memorable, of course. Outrun has those classic memorable tracks, but they're all decent enough. They're all decent enough little bits of music that you can play to. I, however, played with the sound effects, as I found the engine noise really good. I like the engine noise in this. It's deep, and it's what we said, like kind of what we similar said to Stunt Car Racer. A lot of racing games, you have that, and it's horrible. This isn't nice, deep, sort of, just a good throb of the engine. It's good. So once selected, pressing fire again loads in the first track. Now, I tried both the cartridge and disc versions. The disc version is certainly a little more egregious with loading between each race and after the race for the results, screens and everything. So if you want to play this now, get the cart version. Basically, it's instantaneous. The cart version, everything just happens like do, you're just there. Press fire and it's there. And it changes it into a really snappy arcade racer, which is cool. So I like that. I thought it was good. When the race appears, similar, just like the Amiga version, you get a split screen view of the race. If you have chosen to play in 2 players, then you will see both your cars in the center of each view, and a number of decently drawn AI cars in front of you. Obviously, it can't do what the Amiga does and display all 20. There are 6. There are about 6 in front of you, both of you, though. So that's more than we normally see in these kind of games on the C64, I have to say. The UI the UI is at the bottom of each screen, each view. It has your position in the race. And that's in the top right corner of your window, so that's quite nice. And basically, just wants you to press fire to get going. Under each window, as I said, is your car info. On the left, there's a series of boxes. Again, another really nice touch. That they represent the number of laps you have for each race. So 4 boxes, 4 laps. 5 boxes, 5 laps. And they slowly fill up as you progress around the course. So as because it's a lap. And as you get closer to the thing, that box will fill up, and then it moves to the second box, and so on and so on. And this shows your progress in white for your view, and there's another series of boxes underneath that, which is your opponent's progress in red, and it does it on both screens. So this is a great way to show where each player is in the race and how far ahead or behind they are. I thought this was excellent. It's a really good idea because whether they've lapped you, whether how many laps they've done. It's just there. It's really easy. Sort of essential, sort of easy visual read of where what's going on in the race. I thought it was excellent. Across from this, you have 2 bars labeled R and F. R is your revs, which is obviously useful in manual, and F is your fuel, which goes down as you race. Then there's your speed in miles per hour and the gear you're currently in. The slice of race that you can see, so the view of the race has your car in the center, and the track moves around you. So you stay central, the track moves left and right as you steer around. There are no markings on the road, but the sides of the road, often the green or the brown, different colors, brown or the white, depending on the type of track, is like the sort of raster bar lines to indicate the speed you are going. So that's how they generate the speed. There are also a series of roadside furniture, like signs to indicate turns, trees, bushes, that kind of thing as well, that scale quite well. When you start, you'll be at the back of the pack. This means that there are either 18 or 19 cars ahead of you, depending on whether it's 2-player or not. And the interesting is these cars all exist in the race. They're all racing, the same as you. So as you fight your way through them, you'll climb up the ranks. That will obviously display the UI. And if you get to first, slower cars will still bother you because you're going to start lapping them. So the other faster cars that are behind you will be chasing you, but there's slower cars that will get in your way. So even if you do get to the front, the game still is tricky to try and get past the other cars. You don't want to hit them. But that's quite nice. So they're all, and when you finish, you've actually got to wait for all the other cars to actually finish the race as well before it goes on to the sort of scoreboard. So there's no guarantee of a smooth ride even in first place. Just to say here, if you're playing single player, the game's still split screen, but the bottom view is taken up with the side-on view of the Lotus Esprit. In the Amiga version, there are a couple of mechanics animated sort of fixing it. This doesn't have that, but it's just a sort of side-on view. It's nicely drawn. Well drawn. It looks like a Lotus Esprit Turbo. But it's just a still image. So that to have that. So the aim of each race, it's a racing game, finishing the top 10. Okay, fail to do this, it's game over, and you have to start again. That's the same across all 3 difficulty levels at any point in the race, no matter which one you're in. If you manage this, though, you then get to a rankings grid with all the drivers getting points for where they finished, and you get points as well, depending on where you finished, with 20 for first, 15 for second, 12 for third, so on, top and down for the top 10, all the way down to 1 for 10th place. If you don't finish top 10, it's game over, as I said. In 2-player mode, as long as one of you finishes in the top 10, both of you progress. That's quite nice. So it's like you kind of just want one of you to get in that top 10, and then it's fine. If you do, you can keep racing through the actual tracks. But obviously, if you didn't finish something, you won't get any points, and everything builds up. So different racers, you'll learn to sort of know where they are in the pack and things like that. And you kind of, you'll see them getting scores, a bit like what we saw in Mario Kart. We see all the other racers, Bowser and everyone getting points and things like that. So after seeing the table, you progress to the next race and it all starts again. Depending on where you finished in the last race also determines your position on the grid in the next one. So finishing first puts you at the back of the pack. Finishing 10th sees you starting in the middle. Again, a nice touch. I quite like that. So, you see that in normal racing as well. So as you progress, as long as you make it, you're going to be in the back half of the pack, but depending on where you finish, depends on your position. As you progress through the tracks, some of them will actually be too long to finish with the fuel you start with in your car. You will need to refuel, because if you don't, you will run out of fuel and it's game over. So just after the checkered flag on each lap, there is a pit lane, sort of the third lane on the right-hand side of the track. You go in there and slow up as much as you can, and then it switches to a view of your car being refilled. You don't have to change tyres or anything. You just have to put some extra fuel in your car, and it does it automatically. So you just sat waiting. You probably don't need to fill it up all the way because you've probably only got a couple of laps left. And so, as you're in there, the race is going on without you. And the CPU cars, I don't think they ever pit. So they're always going. So you don't want to spend too long in there. So press your fire button to get out and off you go again. The longer you spend in there, the more places you will lose because you've just taken longer to fill up with fuel. And you don't need a full tank generally. And that's it, really. Off you go. Once you're back in the race, off you go. That's it. It's a racing game, but it's a pretty, it has a decent sense of being a racing game with a series. You're trying to win a season of races in both easy, medium, and hard over 7, 10, or 15 races. And the higher up you finish, the more points you get, and you want to come first. And that's quite the challenge. So this manages to replicate all the features of the 16-bit version, but by the way it looks and plays, sort of thing. So it's got it all, and it's all, and that's really quite impressive. I said it's a multi-load. Each track loads individually, but there's a lot of tracks. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot on screen, and it's there's a lot to play. And I thought for a C64 racing game, I thought this looked pretty impressive. Your car's big and detailed. It's obviously it's not what we got on the Amiga. The opposing cars similarly so. They're a bit chunky, but I think they scale well. So there's some nice sprite scaling with the other cars. And like I said, there can be up to 6 of them in front of you on the track at once, which is quite impressive for this. And that's even more if you're playing in 2 players as well. I think you can have even more on them. If you've got a decent full grid at the start of the race, or even as you're plowing through the pack and stuff. The speed of the track is acceptable. It's not blindingly fast, but it's solid enough pace. And I like the fact that there's hills and valleys, as it says in the things. You go up and down. If you hit something on a downhill slope, you'll speed up quicker. If you're on an uphill slope, you'll take you longer. So that kind of works as well. And that's replicating the tone of your engine as well. So you'll speed up a lot faster and it'll go higher tone. The backgrounds, there's just some simple mountains off in the distance, but they're recognizable, certainly better than those ones we saw in Super Monaco GP the other week, which was that sort of horrible blancmange effect. But these are okay. They're perfectly fine. And indeed, the number of cars on the track here is way more impressive than any we've seen so far on the machine. I don't even think Power Drift had this many CPU cars visually on the track at the same time. And as previously noted, the tunes for the game are fine. But I did like the engine sounds that it has. So the handling's pretty forgiving. It's easy enough to get around the corners, and I can, I would recommend that fire button to accelerate, which I think is the better mode to actually play through. There's a lot going for this. The main downside to the game, the CPU cars themselves, the on-track furniture and the collision detection. As the tracks progress, you'll get rocks, oil, barriers, and signs on the track. And I found that the collision on these just seemed too big. It's too wide, which is a real pain. You've got to really be off to the side of the track to get around these things. You kind of learn after a while, but it's just a bit of a pain that the collision on them is just a bit too much. So it also knocks your speed down to a crawl. And that can be a pain. Same goes for the AI cars. Now, these are a pain in the ass. They do that thing of moving across in front of you time and time again. And they do this even in parts of the track where it's down to one lane, and you'll hit them, and the slowdown that you actually experience is massive. You really do, I've hit something, I'm down to low speeds, and I've got to wait to sort of speed up again. This wouldn't be so bad if the cars coming up behind you suffered the same fate driving into the back of you. They don't. They just drive straight through you, which is very annoying and very frustrating because you can bump a car, so they can, and so bump a car from, you'll see, if you bump a car, you'll just see a load of cars go past you. Sorry. I think I was rating very fast here in my notes. So you'll see if you bump into a car, you'll see loads of cars go past you and you'll lose loads of places. And that's very annoying, especially if you've got to finish in the top 10. It's exacerbated when you're speeding up and a car passes through you just as you're about to sort of go past its speed, and then you drive into the back of it. You're down. It knocks you back down again, and then you lose more places. That's really annoying. I mean, and it really puts a bit of a damper on this, and that kind of thing. It can cost you an entire run, and then being sent back to the beginning. Game over. Try it all again for a failure that doesn't feel like your fault, but an actual problem with the game. leads to some serious frustration. And I felt, I was like, this is so close. I don't understand why the cars just drive through you. I don't get it. I mean, there's obviously some technical aspect to it. They obviously just not put collisions in, but they should hit the back of you, and that should be the end of it. It should just have that. However, when you do get up to top speed, and at some point when you do manage to weave your way through a crowded section of track and gain several places, I actually found this quite thrilling and satisfying at points when I was like dodging left and right and passing through loads of cars at full speed and getting into first place. Genuinely, I was like, this is when this works. It's really very good. I really enjoyed it. It runs smoothly for the most part. I didn't notice any slowdown anywhere. I did feel it in two-player mode, though. It felt a little less responsive. I think the frame rate might be a little bit slower in two-player, which is understandable considering the amount of stuff going on. But it's not by much, though, and I don't think it hurts the playability of the game. For something that was a downpour of a really technically impressive Amiga game, I think that Ashley Bennett has done a very good job on this. It doesn't look as good as the Amiga. It was never going to. It doesn't run as smoothly. It was never going to, and it doesn't have as many cars on screen. It was never ever going to. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed this far more than I did any of the recent big arcade ports that have been running away with gold medals like Turbo Outrun, Chase HQ2, Super Monaco GP. I thought this was better than all three of them. I enjoyed this more. But it has that annoyance. That I don't want to overstate that, but it is a real issue with it because you can find yourself having a game over and it's just like, I'm done. I can't catch him up now. And you'll also find, because of the number of cars on track as well, that you might come up to like 3 cars in a row and they'll be close together, trying to get through all 3, which I suppose is the same as in realistic racing, is really tricky. But it's the way they kind of like sort of almost like interweave between them. Sort of just you'll get round one, but the other one will be moving to get in front of you. And it can be that, you can lead to frustration. Mm-hmm. You just can't seem to get past me. I don't know. The loading can get in the way if you play off disc, but I think in the here and now play the cartridge port, as I said, it can be frustrating at times, as I said, but when you're getting smacked by the opposition AI. But when you figure out how to thread the needle on the road, and I did at times, and I got quite far in, I didn't quite finish easy. I got to, I think, a 6th race where there's those stupid, there's the signs on the track which are massive, mm-hmm. and it's like, oh God's sake! I found there was some enjoyable racing here, and I thought this was probably worthy of the Sizzler. It's technically very impressive. I think what they've actually got running on this game on this machine was pretty impressive. So I came away from this, wasn't sure what to expect because obviously I played it on the Amiga, but overall I thought they've done a pretty good job here, and probably the best racing game we've seen since Power Drift. What about you?
I don't think it's as good as that. For a start, this was always going to be second fiddle to the Amiga version. Its home was on the Amiga, so it was never going to be as good as that. I'm not a fan of playing these racing games through a letterbox. I think it's a cheap cop-out to do that. Games like Turbo Outrun play full screen, and that's the machine is perfectly capable of supporting that with the right kind of code. Power Drift does. So to cram everything into a letterbox at the top of the screen and try and play that's the best way. I'm sorry, it doesn't wash for me. I found the car was then too big for that viewpoint, which meant that it felt like it slid around too much and didn't feel like I had much of a control over it. The green stripey effect just ended up getting me cross in the end because I'm just sick of racing games having green stripey effects. And I thought the background detail, not that it's important, but I thought it was just a collection of dots and lines. It didn't really look like anything, but I suppose it doesn't really matter that it did. It did have the speed. It ran pretty fast and it had stuff going on. I found that the angle of the car that you control was too flat, which meant the view ahead of the road was oddly limited, which also wasn't helped by the fact that you had a limited view anyway, because half the screen is taken up with a redundant image. And the steering felt a bit floaty at the edges, so it was kind of responsive when you wanted it to be ish, but sometimes when you was expecting it to be, it wasn't. And then of course you got the entire problem of the indestructible race cars of doom that just come plowing through you as if you're not really there. And so I thought this is a good attempt. This is a good attempt at a version of that game, which was well outside of the scope. I mean, it's arcade quality, famous for it, and the sequel even more so. There's a lot to try and do, and I get it as well. They wanted to up the ante a little bit on the visuals and not just make another Pit Stop 2 variant, because Pit Stop 2 has ruled the 2-player roost for many a year, and not because it's super great, just because it was great at what it did. So I get the idea of that. I just think there's just there's annoyances and niggles around the edges that in isolation probably wouldn't be too much of a problem, but they build up. And so you feel like you're kind of trying to play a racing game within a very confined space, with a giant car in a very confined space, against giant cars in a confined space with a degree of odd controls. the scalability of the controls was an issue for me. The road and the car are sort of inappropriately scaled, which means your responses for the turning on that road are then exaggerated because you kind of, a big car turning on a small road via a small window is difficult to sort of gauge the scalability of the bends. But I think if you were to persevere with it, and that's the key really with this, I think if you were to persevere with it, what there is competently put together, and there's no question about that, and it's a really good attempt. I just think that by now I was into the Amiga version of this, which I really, really liked. All of these games are great on the Amiga. So to come back and play this, it was a nice retrospective, and it was good to see the C64 have a go. A little frustrating that they kind of fell into classic C64 race game territory. Maybe that's just the only way you can do it. But we've seen Power Drift be able to do a little bit more with this kind of format. So it surprised me that there was just and especially when you've got multiple loaded levels and tracks in, I thought there'd be a little bit more scope to make it a bit bigger on the screen and give me that flexibility. But you know what? I didn't play this 2-player. Maybe that's where the real heart of this game is on the Amiga. This was always a game that was better when you had a few friends around and you were playing it multiplayer, as we then discovered with the sequel, I think. So yeah, I didn't like it as much as you, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate that it was a really good effort in a sea of a genre that's had some real dog eggs in it. It's nowhere near that bad. Do I think it's as good as some of the other sort of, pretenders to the crown? I think it's trying something different. It's not trying to be Turbo Outrun. Turbo Outrun's a very different type of game, actually. This is an actual proper race game as opposed to a time trial. And that does make it different. So this is more aligned to Pit Stop 2. And I'd still, unfortunately, say Pit Stop 2 has the edge on it. But maybe that's because I spent way more time with Pit Stop 2 on the 64 than I did with Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. But it is good, and the graphics are good. And for a Gremlin game, nice to see them back on their form, as it were, considering they've spent a large time squatting down and laying these really fanciful eggs, which haven't really hatched into anything meaningful. I liked the idea of it more than the implementation, but it wasn't terrible. I suppose that's what I would say. I don't know if 90% was a bit high, but it's not. Just certainly doesn't deserve anything below 70 or anything like that. 75 for me, but it is what it is. Yeah, so if you like it, and I think, like I said, I think perseverance with that would pay off. I think giving it more time than I did. I mean, I played it for as much as I could, but giving it more time, I think you'd learn the little rules of the road on there, and maybe you'd find a bit more fun in that. And there is a lot to go at, so there is that. So
did it bother you? Did the Amiga version bother you? Because that never was full screen.
No, I think it's just time served. The Amiga just runs at a different pace, and you can't really compare Amiga versions to C64 versions in that way. This was a game that, when it came out, looked very different to most of the things on the Amiga, and it was leaning into that newfound wave of games that were coming out at around that time. We've not been far off Speedball 2, have we? And there was just Amiga games were starting to really sort of mature into the use of the power of the Amiga to really start to move things around, and it just felt like a really good arcade game. Whereas this one, I just didn't spend any time on a C64 on it. Would I have been impressed with it? I don't know. Maybe if I'd had 2 players, maybe we'd have better, because at least you could just stick the joystick in and have a 2-player game with it, couldn't you? And that is always a good thing about these games, and that's what was good about Pit Stop 2, is that you felt like you were in a race with other racers. So many of these recent racing games have felt like you're just a car avoiding stuff, which isn't really what you want, is it? So it does have that racing strength. It does, it does have that strength. It does. Yeah,
that's fair enough. I mean, each thread. I mean, racing games are not your bag. Technically, you're normally out there. You're not a driving game.
No, not at all. No, not really. No. I don't really like any of them. So apart from if you're playing them 2-player, and I think that's where I've really ever found fun in them.
Yeah, the social aspect is always going to...
On these ones especially, and of course, by this point, I'm Amiga all the way, so... But it isn't bad. For C64 owners that are, still on the C64 at the time, and if that's the best you could get, it isn't bad for that. That's fair.
Absolutely, yeah. There you go, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge, our first game this week. We've still got 4 to go, another one this half. So let us move on to our next one. And Graham, it's time for us to once again visit the environs of Mega City 1 and find out once again what it's like to be Judge Dredd.
Yes, Judge Dredd is back in Virgin Mastertronic form this time, because, of course, last time he wasn't. I'll talk about that in a bit. This is coded by a chap called Alan Botwright. Now, this is his only game credit, according to Lemon. However, Alan Botwright has actually gone on and done some interesting things. So firstly, there's a game called Brides of Dracula, which was scheduled for release back in 1992. We'll never get to it because it was never actually released. It was 98% finished, according to Alan Botwright. And the screens that are out there and on the games that weren't actually look really, really good. So what quite happened there, I think, from what he describes, the publisher ran off with the money or something like that. But there's an entire page around that and what happened. So, but Alan Botwright, obviously quite a talented programmer because he was quite young when he did this. And this was his first publishable game for the C64. And in a podcast, there's a podcast called Great Software People. And in episode 7 of that, they interview Alan Botwright, who is now it says the subtitle is From Homebrew Game Development to Becoming a Tech Tour de Force. So he's now the director of product and solutions and marketing at a company called Acquia. But interestingly, he mentions it's basically what got you into the whole industry. And he mentions the C64 and particularly mentions coding Judge Dredd. Because prior to that, he'd sent lots of demo discs and demo code to various publishers, and eventually one of them contacted him, and he went for a job, I think, and got it, and this was his first job. So pretty impressive those demo things must have been to give a license like Judge Dredd to somebody, really, isn't it? Anyway, what's all this mean? Well, the graphics were by Chris Lowe and Ned Langham. We've seen Ned Langham before, haven't we? Hades Nebula in Narc and Swiv. And Robert Whittaker also did the credits. We've seen him before. I'll say Street Cred Boxing, and I'm not going to say any of the others. And the musician here is Tony Williams. Now, Tony Williams, what can we say about Tony Williams? He did Droids and Shinobi. That's all I'm saying. The box art was by somebody called Dermot Power, which sounds like a switch on a stereo or something. It's not loud enough. Activate the Dermot Power.
Oh, there's not enough Dermot in this game. In this recording. This
scored 53% though in Zap, which is disappointing, isn't it, for a Judge Dredd game? Have we not learned anything since the tragedy that was the Melbourne House thing?
No, we haven't.
So something may be right, something may be wrong. So anyway, what Judge Dredd? Judge Dredd's a dystopian sci-fi icon, according to the information I've got. First appeared in 2000 AD in 1977. He's get to be an old man nowadays. And probably not just so much Judge Dredd as kind of Judge Toothless, maybe now. Set in the sprawling, crime-ridden metropolis of Megacity 1. It follows Judge Dredd, a ruthless law enforcer who acts as a judge, jury, and executioner in a society on the brink of chaos. With his signature lawgiver pistol and ironclad sense of justice, Dredd embodies the brutal authoritarian rule of the judges. The series, such as the comic series, explores themes of fascism, crime, and dystopian survival, mixing satire, action, and dark humor together. So, and not being someone that read a lot of Judge Dredd, I'll take it that is accurate. Over the decades, it's inspired movies, games, and has a dedicated fan base to this day, cementing its place as a pillar of British sci-fi. Now that I would agree with. I would definitely agree with. This is British through and through, and has been imitated and copied in so many ways, including, dare I say, films like RoboCop and things like that. So blatantly stolen the ideas of this. Anyway, there's been a couple of films. One was in 1995 that starred Sylvester Stallone. It wasn't too well received, that one, because of course the first thing he did was take his helmet off, which is not something that Judge Dredd had ever done, I don't think, at that point.
Nope.
Which I believe annoyed lots of the hardcore Dreddites. And then there was another one in 2013, I think it was out. It might have been earlier than that.
Yeah.
That's the date I've got. Anyway, so it starred Carl Urban, and that film was the better of the two. That was directed by Pete Travis, but apparently in reality, that was actually Alex Garland who wrote the screenplay for that and is credited as the editor and probably the guy that did most of the other stuff, much to Pete Travis's chagrin. And Pete Travis, as of course we all know, went on to hunt down Blake in Blake 7. So that's what happened to him.
There's a reference.
There's also been other games. There's also been other Dredd games, including the crap 1987 Melbourne House version, which we looked at and shit on back in episode 46, when we described it as, quote unquote, another blocky Melbourne House turd. Okay, so there you go. That's what we said. Yes, that's what we said. Anyway, this is not that game, nor is this a Melbourne House game, is it? So, like I said, this is the Virgin Mastertronic one. So the story then of the game. So, I mean, the story of the game, it's the story of Judge Dredd. I'll just go through this in kind of quick speed because there's not really a great deal of story to Judge Dredd in the sense of making a game out of what he does, which is what this is. So it says there's maybe a few facts and things you didn't know about Judge Dredd that I'm about to reveal to you, Adrian. So prepare yourself for that.
Okay.
Tough but fair. Judge Dredd, first name Joe. So his name's Joe Dredd.
It is.
Is the most respected and most feared lawman in Megacity 1, cloned from the finest genetic stock. Felt very Conan when I said that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's bred to the finest stock.
Finest stock. Scribbles notes furiously and watches him. Judge Dredd embodies a harsh system of government dedicated above all to the maintenance of law and order in the city. A huge towering metropolis of the 23rd century, the giant megacity was built to solve the critical problem of overpopulation in America. Most of the city's 400 million citizens live in vast self-contained tower blocks, fully equipped with every amenity: schools, hospitals, shopping malls, leisure complexes, and even civil defense groups. These cities within the megacity supply the citizens every physical need, but cannot relieve the terminal boredom brought about by their futile existence. Everything in their lives is controlled, even the weather. Crime rate escalates daily, and there is one suicide every 45 seconds.
It's quite bleak for a video game start, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The 23rd century is a world where the drudgery of work has been replaced by the equally mind-numbing effects of a constant leisure. And with the unemployment running at about 80 to 90%, many citizens turn to bizarre hobbies and get swept along by weird crazes. Many more turn to crime. This sounds arguably familiar. I mean, it doesn't have to be the 23rd century, does it? That could be describing...
We're speed running our way to this, I think.
I know. I'm going to say this is sounding a bit alarming, like TikTok and bizarre hobbies that come from that and weird crazes. Chronically overcrowded, the city has proved to be an ideal breeding ground for violent crimes of all kinds. The judges were needed to control this crime, empowered to mete out instant justice in the course of their duties. The judges regard every citizen as a potential perp, criminal, and even the most petty offences are cracked down on hard. The life of the average megacity citizen is dominated by fear, not only of criminals, but also of the people they must trust to protect them. So that's the setup. That's the setup.
Yeah.
So Megacity 1 is under siege in this game from those violent criminals, mutants, and other lawbreakers, and it's up to Dredd to dispense justice using his signature lawgiver gun. The game does not follow a direct storyline from the comics, but instead offers a series of missions where the players must hunt down and apprehend or eliminate criminals, including some of Dredd's most infamous foes. The game is a side-scrolling run-and-gun platformer with gameplay elements reminiscent of other action games of the era, like RoboCop, Narc, and most of the Ocean games over the last period that we played that all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
Players must navigate the various multi-level urban environments of Megacity, filled with enemies and civilians running about and or otherwise trying to stop you or just plain getting in the way. As you might expect, Dredd wields his lawgiver pistol, capable of firing different types of ammo. The selection system for this was weird on the emulator, though, because, of course, I'm on a Mac, so function keys and shifts and all sorts of faffing about. But on the C64, it was F1, F3, and F5 to select weapons between standard bullets, high-power laser, and homing missiles, of which you have limited supplies of, at least two of those things. And you can press F7 to show the weapon status as well, which is, and I'll talk about the UI in a moment. You can also press the spacebar to summon your Lawmaster motorbike, which means you can move around the level quicker, but remain unable to shoot and other stuff. There's also an arrest system in this game too, which means Judge Dredd can also arrest criminals outside, instead of outright killing them. I actually found the methodology of that somewhat confusing in its implementation, but some of the enemies in the level seemed to pause when I went over them and then flew off, and I'm guessing they were arrested, and the crime level went down. So
that sounds similar to Narc.
Yes, well, like I said, there's leanings of Narc and things in this. All of this, of course, is to keep the crime rate down, which is the key to success of this game. You don't have lives in this game, but if your energy runs out or you get squashed or something happens, you end up in hospital, and your recovery time means that the crime rate will increase. If the crime rate gets too high, it's game over. So the crime rate is directly linked to the number of perps you arrest and kill, or also other civilians that you mistakenly kill along the way. And the meter, for such as it is at the bottom of the screen and indicates between C and the crime rate and E for energy. It gets a bit confusing because they sort of compress... Well, they compress the UI into a kind of one space. It's a multifunctional UI that sort of doesn't quite work. But according to the instructions, there are 6 levels, each with a kind of end boss level attached. So level 1 is called the League of Fatties, which isn't very nice to, nowadays with a bit of a model lens. We don't want to, but that's what it is. I'm just looking at it for what it is.
Yeah, that's what they call it.
And to give you an idea of the kind of things you're expected to do, according to the instructions, it says control to Judge Dredd, a 299 for you on Dan Tanner block. As Dredd speeds towards Dan Tanner block, the fatties of Megacity 1 are running riot, devouring everything in sight. 4 food dispensers are placed around the block. Dredd will have to destroy these to quell the fatty rampage. I can't believe I'm saying that. Meanwhile, the civs are taking their revenge upon the fatties and taking any opportunity to shove a fatty off the building and send him crashing to certain death. The fatties desperately attack Dredd, who is threatening their food supply. Running fatties charge into him to try and push him from the building. Jumping fatties climb the building, and then once they are above Dredd, they jump crashing into him as they plummet towards the ground. Some of the fatties are so distraught that they resort to throwing lethal lumps of pizza at him. Remember, every time one of the fatties is successful in squashing, hitting, or jumping on Dredd, his energy level will be affected. So, and then at the end of that is a level called the Food Convoy. And for that, it says, defeated by Dredd, the fatties have hijacked a food convoy. Dredd's only chance of going on to the next level is to reach the front of the convoy before it reaches the fatty hideout. Crazed with hunger, the fatties attack Dredd as he runs along the top of the convoy, determined to hang on to their prize. Thankfully, that's the only level that involves the word fatties, so we don't have to go through all that again.
No.
So that's the kind of way these levels play out. The reason I go through that one is because all of the levels feature a similar kind of idea. So the second level is called the evolution level, and then you conclude that with Fribb's laboratory. And in that one, for example, you arrive on a block to discover the population is slowly regressing to evolution. There's some kind of enzyme that's been released, and you've got to go around the level, finding the various different things, and then sort of trying to find your way through to the professor's laboratory, or Professor Fribb's laboratory, and then the end level is Fribb's laboratory. And in Fribb's laboratory example, it says you've reached the Fribb's lab at the top of the Charles Darwin block, but find the lab has been overrun by amoebas. On the far side of Lab Dredd, you can see a considerably regressed Professor Fribb. Dredd must fight his way through the amoebas and arrest Fribb to complete the level. Dredd's task is made infinitely more difficult as the amoebas split into two when shot. So you kind of get the idea that this is literally a run and gun. So it's a run, platform and gun, or walk and platform and gun initial level, and then kind of a run to the end and do stuff kind of approach. And that's kind of the methodology of the levels. So level 3 is the Acquia station that leads to the sludge truck. Level 4 is the weather station that leads to the shuttle. Level 5 is just something called Block Mania, which leads to the big gun. And then level 6, the Dark Judges just lead to the Dark Judges. And if you know your Judge Dredd mythology, and I don't, then you'll probably understand what the importance of the Dark Judges and the Dark Judges of Judge Death and Pestilence and all that malarkey is. For me, it means very little to me. Very little to me.
All right.
So each level actually requires Dredd to complete those specific tasks in that kind of way. You know, find a thing, switch the things off, navigate around, and that's what you'll do. You might need to apprehend a certain criminal or take down a specific target, and you'll see sort of how that kind of works. Each time you go between a level, there's like a little not ticker tape, I guess you call it, but kind of a display with a little readout on it. And it tells you it's from Justice Central, and it kind of gives you a readout of what's expected of you and what the next mission is and things like that. So that's how the game is kind of, the narrative is fed to you, and then you're into the game doing the thing. So when you start the game, to get into all of that, there's a kind of a busy title screen, but busy with text. You know, I don't know if there was more to the beginning of this on the official version, but there's sort of a title screen, and then you get through to kind of a readout. You can speed it up or slow it down by pressing the fire button, but it says things like, welcome to Justice Central, system specifications follow, blah, 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 to set the scene, and a message ends. It's kind of a digital readout. I imagine Judge Dredd's meant to be looking at this on some kind of screen, perhaps, or something, to read off these things. Into the game, then. So I think this does win the award for the simplest UI of all time, actually, because at the bottom there's just like a health bar that looks a bit like a banana. So your health banana is at the bottom. It has your energy. It also is the crime rate indicator, and it's also the indication space for the kind of weapon you've got. So it serves many purposes. Mm-hmm. None of it really makes any sense apart from your energy going down. So the crime indication seems to be completely arbitrary. So crime goes up, crime goes down, crime goes up, crime goes down. There's no real indication of why or how. You'll shoot a load of perps and it'll go down, and then you shoot a civilian, it'll go down, and the next time it'll go up. And it's as long as it doesn't reach critical mass, you're good, which it will very quickly in this game. And by the way, this game is rock hard. And that is in the bottom border, to be fair. So that is kind of out of the way. But that is the only UI you've got on this. There's apparently scoring in this or something, it says in the instructions, but in reality, you don't really even have lives in this game either. You know, when you run out of energy, you take a trip to the hospital, and then you come out of hospital and you're back into the game, but obviously crime has increased and things have happened, and so you're disadvantaged, really. The main window of the game is pretty much the full screen of the C64. And when you see this level, you get quite a nice graphic representation of a kind of dystopian block. So there are multiple tracked paths that you can sort of stroll around. There's kind of backdrops. They're not very varied, but they are reasonably well appointed in terms of what they look like. And the actual sprites and things like that are actually all pretty nice. Now, the actual sprites in-game, Judge Dredd looks like Judge Dredd. Certainly looks more like Judge Dredd than the previous attempt did. And the enemies do look like characterizations of enemies. So I'll say it for the one last time. The fatties do look like fatties. And I guess the thinnies look like thinnies, and the civilians. It's hard to sometimes pinpoint because the fatties are obvious for obvious reasons. Some of the other civilians and enemies, it's difficult to know which are which. And so oftentimes you just find yourself blasting at everything anyway, and just seeing if that affects your crime rate, really, generally speaking. So I think from the outset, it's got those nice graphics. There's the sort of yellows, greys, browns. The tonality of it is quite dystopian. It feels a bit sort of dirty, the sort of tower block. There is a vibe to it. There is a tower block vibe. And I actually thought the sprite animations are good, particularly when you bring on the Lawmaster. So you press spacebar in the game and it'll summon your Lawmaster motorbike, and that will suddenly run your motorbike.
It's like
and
a horse.
it does seem odd that you're just like rolling around in the exact same level on a motorbike, not that much faster, which is odd. Yep. So it just kind of moves slightly faster with less ability, and I don't know that serves much of a purpose really, but it is in there because I think you had to have it if you've got a Judge Dredd game in there. But it is in there, and it does look quite nice when it's in the game. It would make for good screenshots, I think. That. And all the scrolling works quite nicely as well. There's no issue with multi-scrolling. It scrolls around. You've got no issue with that. You control this with the joystick primarily. And again, like those keyboard options that I said. But mainly this is the joystick to control. Now, I think there is a way you can take your guns out and you can holster them. And I think that has something to do with how you arrest people in it. But some of the descriptions of how you play the game in the instructions are a little bit, they're a bit haphazard. They're a bit skippy. So some of the details you need about how to arrest somebody aren't there. So you kind of just have to wing it a bit, assuming that you're arresting them. Anyway, so like I said, that's how you control the game. That's how the game plays out. It scrolls left, it scrolls right. Now, there are platforms in amongst the game that you can walk up. Now, I can tell you, walking up and down those is a little bit of a dark art. And that's because of the one key thing. Now, this game, by the way, was produced by, I believe it's Simon Pick who produced this ultimately. All the versions. So he was kind of the big game producer for Virgin Mastertronic. And now we've come across Simon Pick before in many instances. However, the reason I mention this is because in an interview that I saw with him, and I can't find the link for it now, but he basically said one of the reasons that he kind of fell out of love with this game is because they made the character of Judge Dredd jump. And it never even occurred to me that would be an issue, actually. I thought, well, I sat there thinking, well, that seems to be an obvious thing. You'd need to be able to jump. And then I thought, actually, Judge Dredd as a character, I don't imagine him doing a lot of jumping. No. He seems to be a kind of guy that would just walk around blasting things, but Robocop-y, really. And so the fact that you can jump quite athletically in this seems odd. And it actually detracts from the game to the point when the idea of you walking left and right and then going up these slopes and kind of going up on these little sort of platforms, it becomes less obvious how you go up. So as you're controlling it, your instincts are to push to the top right-hand corner to go up top right if there's an angled platform, but it doesn't do that. So you end up, then you think, okay, well, I'll just walk that way. And then sometimes it doesn't go up. And then sometimes it does. And if you jump, sometimes it does. Now, I'm imagining that there's probably a methodology that I was kind of either missing or didn't quite get to grips with around that. Or maybe you can only go up certain platforms. I don't know. But it felt like the jump was a thing that it didn't need. And it got in the way. It got in the way of me being able to play this game very effectively. Yes, I could jump away from things. But I think the idea really, what they set the bar for is that you are this big, powerful, justice distributing kind of, gun-toting judge. So why would you suddenly feel like you need to leap out of the way of things heroically and things like that? And it's a bit of a bit of a Mario style leap. It's not even like a big Judge Dredd kind of leap. So I think it was a leap too far. So because of that mechanic added in, I think that detracts actually from the Judge Dreddiness of it all. And so taking that aside then, and bear in mind that all 6 levels of this play this way, and they all kind of look similar, you're left with then thinking, well, the scrolling kind of works. There's no real bugs in that respect. The sprites do look quite nice. There's some nice designs. There are large levels for this. It is a multi-load, and there are quite large levels. All the levels are big. They do feature characters from, I imagine, the comics. I imagine the fatties and all the other things. Oops, I said it again. Are all probably from the comic at some point. Maybe not necessarily this kind of story. And so that's in-game. That's your graphics. Now, out-game graphics. This is where it all gets a bit stupid. So there are meant to be comic panels between kind of some of the levels. So if you end up in hospital, you end up in you get a graphic. If the game is over, then he goes for the long walk and you get another graphic. And these have been done with SCOS, inexplicably done with an SCOS type thing on the C64. So that's a way of displaying an expanded sprite across the whole screen. Now, that works in a context of a kind of a demo, maybe, just. It's a nice effect and a nice technique. But in this, those comic panels are the fidelity of those comic panels is critical for a game that's based on a comic. You need to be a high-res image. No matter how much loading or whatever it takes to have those in, really you need to have that, because that's kind of, even if it's a little bit of one, what it doesn't want to be is this giant blocky monstrosity version of Judge Dredd that appears, which, if you squint and stand enough distance away from your screen, is may be palatable, but in reality, it makes the game look awful. And so you've got these really nice, colourful graphics, and then it jumps to these black and white, giant Blocko-Vision Duplo toy versions of the comic panels. And I just think it was such a daft idea to do. I get it, because they needed to fit a lot in. Now, the price they pay for putting all of these sprites and all these backgrounds and everything in is the memory that they don't have for everything else. Hence the reason why the music is an abysmal afterthought. And these ESCOS images are then really the only way that they can represent interstitial parts and, key things of the game. So when you do go, you're finally beaten and Judge Dredd's taking the long walk, it just looks like a giant blocky motorcyclist that's lost his pants. And it does honestly look like he's taking his trousers off, which threw me because I didn't think that would happen. But maybe, I don't know enough about Judge Dredd to be thoroughly accurate on whether a judge has to thoroughly depant before he takes the long walk. Maybe he does. But I do know that the way to exactly. But I do know that the way to demonstrate that on the C64 is not to use an expanded sprite, memory saver or otherwise, because it just looks blocky. So as you go through the levels, level 2, level 3, the graphics kind of they're okay. They're good graphics, and they do look Mega City-like in terms of the color schemes, but it is very much about a game where you're walking around, climbing on platforms, going up, climbing on more things, right up to the end, the last one, which is slightly less of that. But then you've got the judges to contend with, and really all you're doing is running around and shooting at that point. So, I can't reiterate here what I said about the other Judge Dredd game. I'm going to reiterate here what I said about the other Judge Dredd game, and it's an IP I've never got into in a big way, right, with this. But I am aware of it and some of the stories, and for reasons I'm not really sure of, never really got it on my radar. Probably should have, really. I imagine I would have really enjoyed it.
You would.
So it's odd if I think about it.
Yeah, you would.
But I'm not to say that I don't think it looks genuinely amazing, because it does. That's the comic and all the other stuff. But I think there's a reasonable attempt to do the franchise justice, but we wouldn't have to go far from that Melbourne house turd, would they? But there's a reasonable attempt to do it justice with a game that is firmly planted in the mythos of it all and uses all the basic franchise tropes. So the characters generally look like what they're meant to be. So it looks a bit Judge Dreddy and reasonably, it's a reasonable C64 version of that. If I think of what Dick Tracy looked like, this looks more like Judge Dredd. It does look like him with the right colours and things like that. So they look like what they're meant to be. The sprite work is pretty good, generally speaking. The enemies and the general graphics in the game, they all look like they're from Mega City. There's a nice vibe about them. We've seen games that have tried this before, Knucklebusters, things like that. And this does just felt like it was placed more in that world than other attempts that we've had. The animations are reasonably good on the whole. You've got good walking animation. The jump's stupid, but good walking on all the characters. When they die, there's some good death animations, especially later on in the game. When people try and jump on you, your motorbike's nicely animated. There's nice little touches, like when you put your gun away and you take it out. When your motorbike goes up a level, the front wheel elevates slightly higher than the back wheel. And there's just little touches to the animations and things that make this a little bit nicer than just, anything else of that type. Around the edges, though, it's less successful. I like that visual presentation in-game, but once you're outside of that, those ESCOS massive scale, full screen sprites for comic book panels, that was a massive mistake for this. This is, of all the games you need to represent with fidelity and of all the things, a comic is the one you really need to think about high res, a bit like they did with those graphics in Golden Axe, if you remember, where they had the images from the arcade of all the characters. No, there's no reason why you couldn't display maybe something on a scale like that, because it can look quite nice on the C64, even if it's two color. Not like this, though. So it didn't work. It made it look ugly and cheap. Well, nobody wants that, do they? And then, like I said, no, they were never more than a demo thing, really, and just a quirk at that. Orally, then, this is not winning any awards either. A stilted 1983 4-esque exploration of noise-filtered drums and bleeps and boops. And like I said before, my guess is that the game graphic data took precedence here and left little room for audio or pretty much anything else. So what you get is actually pretty naff, all said and done by SID standards. But I will say this, it's better than the horror of the Melbourne House game, because if you remember right, the music was shrill, so shrill, like the screaming of a thousand chickens. Sound effects in the game, they were quite good, though. The controls feel a little over-engineered, but F keys to change weapons and space for the Lawmaster worked, but in the thick of things, does it? They feel responsive. It does get a bit woolly around navigating up and down the platforms, like I said, with the jumping getting in the way of everything. And for what I can gather, having him jump around, like I said, I don't think that would be a fan favourite, would it? This is akin to him taking his helmet off, having him jump around like that. Totally unnecessary and a silly design choice for a game of Judge Dredd, who is a well-grounded, giant, heavy-booted judge with massive weaponry. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Just choosing to make the controls simpler to go up those platforms and things would have helped me. You don't need to jump up them. You could just walk up if you needed to. On top of that, and this is where the game struggles the most, there isn't any variety to what happens. You walk, you shoot, you go up and down, you find switches or things that you need to switch on or off, you shoot more, rest a few, backward upwards you go, left to right you go, up and down you go, wandering around the levels, meeting criteria, and then onward to more of the same for more of the 6 levels. It's neither no more interesting, no more exciting, and they've tried to dress that crap with all of the finery of the game world in terms of description, but the actual game that you play isn't that. No, it has some of the graphic niceness and it's in that world, but the game's boring. It's just wandering around doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and that's a bit boring to do that. The missions are varied, like I said, in terms of their expectations, but playing them feels like it's just the same thing. Every level kind of feels like it's the same. Add to that, while the background graphics are varied, like I said, they all follow the same basic design principle over and over as well. So each level, even though it's in a different setting, looks kind of the same, and all becomes a bit of a plod about. Now, probably the main takeaway here is this is probably a good attempt at constructing a reasonable 8-bit megacity and filling it with Judge Dredd looking stuff. And in that, I would say this game in-game kind of, it does a reasonable job of that. The blocky comic panels, no, I don't like them. And the game design, it's just flat as a pancake with very difficult to do and also not very interesting to do long term. Walking around, shooting stuff, it can work, but the central core of these missions needs to feel more of an arc. It needed more of a tie into the narrative. That's an in if you've got that. It just feels like, Judge Dredd, we've got some trouble in Mega City 1 and Block 3. Okay, I'm on my way. Bang, bang, bang. Turn off the light switches. Judge Dredd, please come to Mega City 6. We've got another trouble with the fires. Okay, back there we go. Bang, bang, bang. Judge Dredd, all the light switches have come back on. It's just like, this is the most mundane life of Judge Dredd there's ever been. No, I'm pretty sure it's exciting. And then at the end, they throw in the dark judges, and you're like, where do they come from? And even they're like, we're the dark judges. Run around and catch us, Judge Dredd. On this level of running about, it's like, why couldn't they do something a bit more interesting than that? All the code chops and everything else. Okay, this isn't a buggy game in that respect. But no, this is a good multi-load game. There's some nice elements. I just don't think it's going to have enough Judge Dredd in it for Judge Dredd fans. I think making him jump was a big mistake. And I think even though it has the tone and core and the instructions and around the edges and the graphics are nice for what they are, it's just boring at the end of it all. And should a Judge Dredd game be boring? And the answer is, I'm sorry to say, absolutely not. And that was my takeaway. But what about you?
They've still got Judge Dredd wrong, don't they? They just can't get Judge Dredd right. And I was thinking about what they do, but this is just an endless enemy spawning game. It does nothing with the license once again. Yeah, it looks nicer than the previous one, but it's a weird game. It's a strange game in a lot of ways with lots of odd choices. Why can I ride my Lawmaster on platforms? That's weird.
Yeah.
It's strange just odd. Choices. It just feels weird. I don't know why. And like you said, you don't really go much faster. I don't really see the point of the Lawmaster. It don't really. It's like, got to get the bike in. Like, well, give me a bike section.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know what this reminded me of? When I took it, there's a few games this reminded me of. The first one was that Ocean Transformers game.
Yeah, similar.
You kind of, although they were itty bitty Transformers running around on platforms, it was like it's just running around on platforms again, just shooting stuff. This is game design 5 years ago. It also reminded me of which I thought was a better game, but there's elements of Mission AD.
Yeah. I think any game that has platforms where you're running around,
yeah. So, but then again, recently we've had things like Hawkeye, and then even like the Turrican games, which have like come along and done these things and gone, look, this is okay. And the problem is that Judge Dredd, it's not just wandering about shooting. It's not about wandering about shooting fatties. The fatties thing, the stories about the fatties were not about that. They're not in the slightest. So they use the iconography of the comic. They miss the spirit and the themes of it completely, which is really annoying because I was starting to think what would suit a Judge Dredd game at this period in time, and I came down to looking at something like Neuromancer.
Yeah.
And if you think of Neuromancer, Maniac Mansion, Zack McCracken, this Judge Dredd character, like you said, they needed a tie into the narrative.
Yeah,
it was always the narrative of this Judge Dredd stories that was the best thing. The best thing about those stories, the dark judges, everything, obviously the artwork and everything, but you can only represent the artwork so well on 8-bit machine, but it's those stories, not running around shooting shit. Judge Dredd didn't do that. So if you're gonna,
it's the easy choice, isn't it, to do that?
Yeah, really. We said this. It's what they did with. It's what they did with Monty Python.
Yes.
It's the same decision. It's the same decision. Well, that will take money and time to sort of write a decent story and get someone in and do lots of thing and blah blah blah. Well, can't you just do 6 levels where you run around, do the same thing and shoot shit? Well, yeah. Okay, well, we'll just do that then. But if you think of Neuromancer as this sort of futuristic point and click, wander around, adventure where you're sort of finding all this cool stuff out in this sort of, tech world. You think of putting that into Mega City 1 and wandering about and telling the story of the Dark Judges as, Judge Dredd sort of finds out, just starts to uncover all the sort of things, what they're doing and stuff. And, you're being a detective. He's still a detective, not just charging about, riding a motorbike, turning off fat machine. It's just no. So no, it's nonsense. It's just take it away to the cursed earth again and just never let it return. It's just I get it. It's the easy option. And in, at this period in time, this is what games were, but it's not what games had to be because there are other games that do it differently. And there are, we could have, if your source material is a comic full of stories, tell me a story.
Yeah. Do you know what I found a little bit interesting is that the progenitor for this is RoboCop is its next direct comparative link, I think, really.
And RoboCop 2 jumped, didn't he?
Yeah, and if you think, but in RoboCop, the Ocean game, that got 89%, and principally doing more or less exactly the same thing, if not slightly better, I don't know, slightly worse.
Yeah.
Is it as good? So my question to you would be, do you think that it had this, instead of been Virgin Mastertronic, had this been Ocean's version of Judge Dredd, do you think it would have got 89, 90% instead of the 50s?
Probably.
I think it probably would have,
I think it probably would have.
Probably would have, yeah.
Shocking. Yeah. I mean, this is on an equal par with some of those high-ranking Ocean games we've seen recently, which is saying a lot because I don't like any of them either. But it's just we've just seen this kind of thing, and like you said, I mean that walking up thingy, we saw that. Was that last week? We saw that in Herbert, the Huxley the pig thing. It's similar, or Rupert. If you go back to Rupert,
without the shooting, yeah. I mean, this is a very tried and tested game design on the C64. There's so many variations of the walk around and shoot stuff thing. Yeah. And but that was we've always questioned it throughout the whole of the podcast. We've always said, look, if you've got a license like this, then utilize the license to its strengths. You could wield such a great story around that. It doesn't have to be about a guy wandering around shooting. In fact, that's just something that he does. That isn't what he is. That isn't what this world is. This is where's all the dystopian world and all of the complexity of the politics and the nuances of all that in there, which you can convey because we've had games that have had complex stuff in it. You can treat adults like adults. You don't have to kiddify the game into a RoboCop variant of running and shooting to make it palatable for whatever demographic you think you're applying to. That, like you said, that's actually a really good call. The Neuromancer type game, you can treat people with a little bit of intellectual curiosity and stimulus for these, and quite happily people will be able to cope with it. We don't need to dumb down the game.
You could keep some action sequences in it and everything like that. You don't have to be a text adventure. We're quite capable on these machines of doing decent, point and click, walk around adventures with some action sequences in it, as we saw in Neuromancer. But
shame.
Just it's a license ripe for that kind of treatment. But
and just so you know, by the way, the Amiga version, which came out at the same time, is also not very good. It's the exact same problem. There's a little bit more to it graphically and stuff. So. But even that's obviously it has less, it doesn't use SCOS to display a comic panel, so thankfully in the Amiga. But that is all the power of the Amiga and all the graphics you can bring to it, and you still end up wandering around shooting at stuff. It's like
it's game design 1980s 101 basic. Just wander on platforms and shoot shit. Okay, here we go. Judge Dreadful. So that's it for the two games for this part. We shall now move on. We'll come back. We're going to take a break, sorry. We'll come back and we'll look at TV, what was going on UK TV in April 1991. Hopefully, it's a smorgasbord of good stuff. Find out after the break. And we're back. Just the TV to look at from the UK in 1991, April. What was going on? 1st of April. Is this an April joke? No, it's not. April Fool, sorry. No, it's Sue Lawley interviews Prime Minister John Major for ITV. Wow. That's all there is. He was so boring that he never even wrote one.
Well, he was, because of course he was this his first election since he took over the Conservative Party after Thatcher? Because of course Thatcher was, let's say, ousted, but she was asked to leave the party, I think, as the Prime Minister at the time. Because obviously there'd been a whole series of resignations. I think it was Nigel Lawson, wasn't it, that led to the big resignation of Thatcher in the end because he was the Chancellor. And if the Chancellor and the Prime Minister can't get along, there's trouble. And so John Major was the person that came along afterwards. And I think this is the election because he won the election, didn't he? The next election.
Yes, he did. Yeah, I mean, the Tories do stay in until 97, don't they? At this point,
exactly. So the Prime Minister, and he famously was, a bit cardboard and a bit boring. And I don't think, and that's, I mean, my prevailing memory of him is actually of his puppet.
Image.
On Spitting Image, yeah. Which shows you the power of that show, because I remember more of that than I do of him in it, because he was all grey. He's just this grey,
he was just grey
ashen puppet. But it kind of displayed John Major for what he was. And, Lord Major, whatever he is now, is quite an outspoken critique of all sorts of different things. But back then he was John Major, and vote for me and that'd be really cool. So he got in anyway somehow, but I think
with the voice like that, how could he not?
Well, the thing is that a lot of these times, these politicians at that point were getting voted in because the opposition wasn't really presenting anyone that was of any calibre at that time. I forget what the Labour Party at the time in the UK was.
Was it Michael Foot? Was it John? Was it Nick Kinnock at that point?
Kinnock, Foot, I can't remember. But again, I only remember them by their Spitting Image. But I'm thinking I wasn't spending a lot of time watching a lot of actual politicians at this point, which is kind of worrying.
I don't think you were.
But either way, no, I wouldn't have watched an interview with John Major for any reason whatsoever. So nor would I have been aware of anything to do with it.
No.
Which I should have been. It's just coming into the age where I'm paying taxes and things like that. The government policies were actually beginning to actually have a proper direct effect on my own life as opposed to on my parents' life. So
and that. John Major election been the first time we could vote? I think it would have been, wouldn't it?
It might have been, yeah. Well, I didn't bloody vote for him, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, because I turned 18 in 1990, so I think the previous election was 89.
It would have been, yeah. Wow, goodness.
So I don't think I voted for John Major.
No, I don't remember voting for John Major, but I don't remember who I voted for back then. I have no idea. It would have been the opposite. Yeah, I'd have been Labour. Yeah. It wouldn't have been John Major. I wouldn't have known I wouldn't have been able to point him out in a crowd unless it was a Spitting Image puppet parade.
Then I'd recognise him very easily.
It's pretty much the same for me and Steve Davis. If I think of Steve Davis, I think of his Spitting Image puppet. How crazy is that?
Ronald Reagan, anyone. I could barely recognise them, but show me Spitting Image puppet and I'll tell you in an instant.
Power of that show, goodness.
Yeah, very much. 8th of April, the Power Station, one of the channels to have survived the B-Sky B merger with Sky, or British, whatever it was, closes down at 4 a.m. after it was decided that the American MTV would be used as the music channel on B-Sky B's Astra satellite service.
Oh, MTV. I never had any of them services. I didn't have Sky or BSB, so it didn't bother me in the slightest.
No, I was still watching the Power Hour or whatever it was at 3 o'clock in the morning on ITV.
Dregs that we used to get, which was that was quite a little ritual to have, wasn't it? And then MTV, look what happened to that. It doesn't even have music on it, I don't think, anymore. So it just got took over by crappy reality shows and all sorts of horrors.
Yeah, it was was it The Real Thing? That was the first one that sort of broke on it. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, and then there was all the offshoots and the birth of the quasi influencer celeb and goodness knows that's where that ended up. Ugh. Yeah.
8th of April. This is quite interesting. Channel 4's 3-week banned season features a series of films and programmes which have previously been banned from British television or cinema. The season includes the network television premieres of Scum, Monty Python's Life of Brian, and Sebastian. I don't know what Sebastian is. It's also a second broadcast of the controversial 1988 Thames documentary Death on the Rock, which investigated the shooting of 3 members of the IRA by the SAS in Gibraltar. The season proves to be controversial, and Channel 4 is investigated by the Obscene Publication Squad and referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions.
It's quite incredible, isn't it?
I couldn't believe it. I read that bit, yeah.
I mean, if you break down the whole thing there, the fact that we had things that were banned from British television or cinema, for a start. Then you add on to that there was a controversial showing on TV, that it was going to be controversial, and to allow people to see something that they should be allowed to see, and under just being in a democracy. Mm-hmm. And then you add on to that, they then further investigate the very thing that they've said it was okay to show. I'm like, what madness is this world at this point?
I don't know. And as you rightly say, I mean, that was just over 30 years ago. And then you look at what's on TV now. I mean, we're not far past the Video Nasty's sort of debacle in the 80s and everything like that. But the things that we see on streaming services and on TV and stuff these days is, you watch someone get their head popped on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. Goodness me, I watched
or even some of those early seasons of Game of Thrones sort of thing, and some of the sort of sex in them was like, it's just ridiculous. When you look at it, you're like, Christ on a bike.
I just refer anyone to the last season of The Boys. You want to see extreme crazy, just that. Yeah, there's points in that where you are standing agog of the screen going, oh my God, what am I looking at here?
Have you seen Gen V?
Yeah, again, another one.
That one. Yeah, Jesus Christ on a bike.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, it's good that we've come all that way. And I suppose you have to go through that pain barrier to be able to now live in these more emancipated times in terms of media and stuff. But the big prevailing 80s thought was that all of this stuff was harming people, harming the kids, it's harming kids. And then somebody went, no, it ain't. And they were, oh, okay then. And all of a sudden all of a sudden all the brakes were taken off. It happened so slowly though. The tap, was the jar was the steam in the jar was released so slowly that it seems crazy that we've still got a censorship board for cinema. We still have all those things. And yet, what constitutes a 15 now would have been banned outright and would have been investigated by the Obscene Publication Squad.
Yeah.
It just seems utterly incredible to me that we're in that place right now. It's mad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good.
Well, we went to see Nosferatu, the new Nosferatu film the other week. That's a 15, and my partner was coming out of it. She went, that was quite gory for a 15. I was like, yeah. But I was like, well, I mean, in context, that would have been a strong 18 at the time, wouldn't it? And probably had some...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, not the original Nosferatu was an 18 when it came out.
I'm not surprised. Yeah,
not the black and white one from 1900s, but yeah, she's absolutely right. But the thing is, and again, just for in context, because I've recently watched all of the series of The Boys, the 85% of those episodes are a 15.
Yeah,
there's only a few that are 18, and when you watch it, you think, what could there possibly be in this that makes it an 18? And then when it's only like, well, what
happens in the opening?
I see it.
What happens in the opening scene of The Boys? And not to sort of spoil it, there's a character who steps off a road onto a road to cross thingy, and then just gets exploded by a train in front of the partner. Just gets exploded. It's just blood. It's just like you're like, oh my God.
Within the same season, somebody gets ass bombed. So this is just a mad show. But and it's like the extreme end of stuff. But it just shows you how.
Don't forget the bit where the guy shrinks himself down to climb inside the other guy's penis.
It's so gross. That whole orgy sequence alone.
It gets shocked and goes back to full size. Ain't pleasant.
It just there's a whole sequence of two sequences in that season and in the last season which were just like Tech Knight's dungeon will haunt me for the rest of my bloody life. I think. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But the point is. Embrace the fact that we live in these times now, because back in the 80s, this stuff would have been banned outright, and all over the media is destroying our minds.
But I always think like I watch Life of Brian, and I just don't get it. I did get it at the time when I remember first seeing it. I was like, I just thought it was very funny. I get it's poking fun at faith and religion. Obviously we all know what Life of Brian is, but if you can, your faith should be strong. It's like to go, fair enough, okay. If you're so weak, then what is it? I don't know.
I think it does, but I think it depends which faction of Christianity you're dealing with in that. It does. But what I will say is this: that's where I first saw Scum and Monty Python's Life of Brian was during that season. So it worked. I thought it was hilarious. Not Scum, not so much that. That was horrible. But Monty Python's Life of Brian. I did watch. I don't know what Sebastian is like. I would never have tuned into that. Sounds too arty-farty for me, but probably isn't. But.
Probably not. 29th of April, though, on edition of Terry Wogan's evening chat show, Wogan, and amid howls of laughter from the studio audience, footballer turned public speaker David Icke claims that he is the son of God and that Britain will be devastated by tidal waves and earthquakes. He later says that he had been misinterpreted and that he had used the term the son of God to mean an aspect of the infinite consciousness. The interview proves devastating for him. The BBC is later criticised for allowing the interview to go ahead, with Des Christie in The Guardian calling it a media crucifixion.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched... I found a video clip of what claims to be the full version of the interview, and I don't know if it is or isn't, and I watched it all. And I don't know. I mean, it is... Wogan is literally acting as a ringmaster for all of the guffaws of laughter that he encourages, and and ridicules a guy who just has a different view. And let's be quite clear about that. Now, whether you believe he's crazy or not, that's irrelevant. He just had a different view, and nowadays you wouldn't expect somebody who had a different viewpoint, whether it's slightly, the guy's maybe even, dare I say, possibly got mental issues at the time, or there's probably some bigger stuff going on. We thankfully have a bit more of a view on that now, is that we wouldn't just put someone on TV and just parade them around like the local village idiot and make him out to be a complete charlatan, which was what Wogan did. And later, in an interview I saw with him with Richard Madeley, of all people, he actually later came to regret, because he re-interviewed him a number of years later. And David Icke's David Icke. He is essentially a conspiracy theorist and has all sorts of views about all sorts of strange stuff, rightly or wrongly. But Terry Wogan did actually relent and say he shouldn't have cracked the joke about they're all laughing at you, and the way he encouraged it in terms of the interview. We'll put it in the show notes. So it's worth watching. And now, again, his point, David Icke's point in that interview, and I will reiterate it, was that he is just a person saying stuff. And if you choose to believe him, then you choose to believe him, but you don't have to. So you can laugh if you want and do all of those things. It's not bothering him. It's just his point of view. And, okay, that's a fair point. I'll take all that on board. So I'm not here to mock him. And, he's very, he speaks with great conviction in what he does. I'm not a David Icke follower or anything like that at all. But I will say that what you watch in that is a guy who is clearly going on TV with a different viewpoint to what might be considered normal. And he is then crucified for it on TV and made to look like an idiot. And apparently afterwards he was spat on in the street, and people, giving him death threats, and then his family suffered, and his children were then bullied at school. And that is not an outcome. That should not be allowed to happen. The guy just went on TV and said, hey, what about this sort of point of view? People have made careers out of it. People like Alex Jones, people made millions out of doing what he did. So, and probably David Icke has now too. So.
Yeah, probably. I mean, he does his shows, doesn't he? Aren't they like 7 hours long, his shows? They're really long out there.
No, the one
they are these days.
Me and my mate Neil at uni went to see it back, so it's been 94, 95. It was at the Warehouse in Derby, which was weirdly at the home of Progress, which was a really good dance night. So it seemed odd that it would be there. But we went along for more out of just like, for the exact reason half the audience probably went to Wogan, is for shits and giggles, thinking that it'd be let's go and see what happens, it'd be hilarious. And in reality, it was just a guy who was selling a book, and his book was full of ideas around lizard people and all sorts of stuff, and he had a great long justification for all of that, and it involved Illuminati and all of these various conspiracy theories, but he was just selling a book and he had ideas about that, and that's what it was. It was a great big 90-minute show pitch for a book.
They're much longer these days.
Oh, I imagine there's probably seminars and stuff like that. I don't doubt that. I wouldn't go to one, but that's what it was.
The weird thing I always thought with David Icke was that, he was a football commentator or a sports commentator, wasn't he, in the 80s? And that's what I think that was the strange thing. It was like just this TV personality that people kind of knew, like David Coleman and all people like that. And then suddenly, just out of nowhere, there was this whole thing about, the royal family of lizards and all kind of things like that.
Again, he had an epiphany, I think, and a lot of that stuff like that is probably, I would argue, massively out of context. They've cherry-picked the things that are juicy for media, crucifixion, and thrown them at him. I'm not saying that his point of views aren't really weird, because they genuinely are. But at the same time, what made him turn to that, and what made him realise that? Maybe he just figured that he could make more money doing that than he could as a sports presenter. And those decisions he's making are no different to the Druckers and the big American guy that does all of his positive thinking seminars and all that. They're no different to those guys. They're peddling a different story, but it's the same deal. They're just selling ideas and ideologues and conspiracy theories, and people buy them. This is the same people that buy JFK books and all the conspiracy theory around that, rightly or wrongly. It's no different to people peddling that kind of narrative. He's just doing it in a different way. And the world wasn't ready for that back then. And I don't know if it's ready for it now, but he's still peddling it. So he must be making some money at it, at least.
Yeah. I think the world is more open, and there's more people that are probably into that sort of stuff these days.
Yeah. His predictions
for good or for wrong.
Well, his predictions in Wogan, there's going to be earthquakes and there's going to be, volcanic eruptions. It's like, well, that's a pretty safe bet on a planet that's volcanic. To be fair, if you're going to say, of all the things you could say, the Earth is going to have eruptions. I could predict that right now. There's going to be earthquakes and volcanoes going on. In what time scale? Well, in the intergalactic time scale. Exactly. In the next million years. There's bound to be. And well, there probably is, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Those tectonic plates aren't not moving. They're moving all the time.
And the bigger question is, why didn't Mike Oldfield release an album called Tectonic Plates? Because it seems to me that would be a good title for him.
Tectonic Plates 2.
Exactly.
Tectonic Plates. Bong. Anyway, 2nd of April. New shows. Mike, you've cracked the plate.
Mike, what you done? The walls are crumbling. Stop.
David Icke was right. 2nd of April. All right, new shows. That's it for TV. New shows. 2nd of April. Kinsey.
Never watched it. Never heard of it.
No. So this told the story of maverick Birmingham solicitor Neil Kinsey, his business partners, rival solicitors, and the cases they were fighting for their various clients. They're always a maverick, aren't they? They're always a maverick.
Yeah, they have to be a maverick. Yeah.
A maverick. And it always that write-up immediately reminded me, I don't know if you ever used to watch it. You probably used to watch
I watched the Fast Show, yeah.
Monkfish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monkfish. Detective Monkfish. Who are you? I'm Monkfish. Give me a cup of tea.
Yeah, it's bound to be that, isn't it?
Yeah, so we'll put a clip there. We'll put that. If you've never watched Monkfish on the Fast Show, we'll put a clip in the show notes.
Go watch it.
Go watch it because it is very funny. 2nd of April, there was The Advocates. God. Scottish legal drama, broadcast on ITV, ran for 2 series. Starred Ewan Stewart and Isla Blair. And when I read Isla Blair, I got her confused with Isla Sinclair. And I thought she's on a Generation game. Very different woman.
So I got her confused with Isla Fisher. So that shows what it says about me.
But Isla Blair, she's in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as Mrs. Donovan.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, that's the bad guy Squeeze, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because he's called Donovan, isn't he? The main bad guy in it. So it's obviously his wife.
7th of April, The Darling Buds of May started.
Wowza.
I know. They said it ran 91 to 93. I thought it ran for longer than that. It seemed to be on forever.
I think it's because the older people and David Jason, he just, when it's in a TV show, it just seems to just never be of any time and age. It just exists.
No. Yeah, so this was, what was it? It was adaptation, wasn't it? Adaptation of, was it novels of the same?
H.E. Bates, isn't it?
Yeah, so these were like very British, very sort of country, set in the 50s, weren't they? And they were like just.
I think I never watched a single episode of it.
Yeah. And David Jason was the dad, and they had and obviously, but the character that obviously the actress that made the move out of this, I suppose, is Catherine Zeta-Jones, where she kind of got a big break. And she would go on to do lots of things in Hollywood.
Marry Michael Douglas for one. Yeah,
and did that film with Sean Connery where she puts a bum through the lasers.
The laser bomb film, yeah.
Laser Entrapment. Was it Entrapment?
Entrapment. I think it might have been, the one with the rob the museum.
That film is so gratuitous. It is ridiculous.
Yeah, and they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
Absolutely. It's just Sean Connery watching her ass on a screen, I seem to remember.
Yeah, well, if you're going to get anyone to justify anyone else doing it, if Sean Connery can do it, we all can.
True. And then she was in Chicago, wasn't she? I think she was in the...
She said, watch your ash. Your ash is in the lasers.
It's not good. It's not good. Yeah, exactly that. But that film wasn't very good.
Yeah, she's in Zorro as well, isn't she? And she's also in Oceans.
She's in Zorro.
Is that Oceans 12 she's in? I want to say Oceans 12, the second one, I think.
Think so, yeah.
The big love story with Brad Pitt, where every time you see her, the music goes ding, 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 ding. It's like, oh, here we go. It really does. You'll know what I mean when you watch it. It's like,
someone fell on the xylophone.
Yeah, it's like that, honestly.
Stop falling on that xylophone.
I mean, she's a very striking looking, isn't she? Very striking looking lady. There's no doubt about that.
7th of April, there was Prime Suspect that started.
I've never watched it, but I know it's a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it ran forever, 15 years. Wow. So this was Linda LaPlante, her books. It starred Helen Mirren as Jane Tennyson, one of the first female detective chief inspectors in Greater London's Metropolitan Police Services. Rises through the ranks while confronting institutionalized sexism within the police force. Very popular series, very popular.
Yeah. They're still doing them, though. Is it still around?
No, it's finished. I mean, this was one of the first big, British crime procedurals of a sort of this kind of style. We get loads of things like this. I mean, Helen Mirren's always watchable. Not my kind of thing. I wasn't watching this time. I was always more of a Midsummer Murders type of guy, personally.
Take your word for it. I wasn't either. I know what you were doing on Sunday afternoons now, I guess.
Give me John Nettles, whatever his name's, Bergerac any day of the week.
Oh, God's sake, no.
Rural Suffolk or wherever they were, solving murders.
Bergerac is almost, it sounds like a paint colour. What colour are those walls? Oh, they're Bergerac. Oh, they are. It's a lovely colour of Bergerac. A lovely shade of Bergerac you've got on that wall.
or Burger Rack.
Don't want to think about what that is. So no, I didn't watch this, but this is, I don't know what I'm watching at the minute, but it's not that.
No, none of this. 10th of April as a murder of quality.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Whatever this is. So this was a TV film. It's based on a John le Carre book. So it's a Smiley book. It's a George Smiley story. So it's a murder mystery and a George Smiley. So it's spies as well. That's a winning combo.
Yeah. So it's a TV film. So would have done the heavy rounds on ITV, I'd have thought, around that time. They were really heavy on these sort of American-y style importy things. So
if you haven't watched, or if anyone hasn't watched the most recent, the Gary Oldman, not Gary Newman, the Gary Oldman, the George Smiley one, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the most recent version of that, it's very, very good. I would recommend that film if you like that sort of thing. Just excellent stuff. Loads of quality British actors in there, but it's a really good film.
That's it. And you get to see Gary Oldman in action, of course. We talked about it last time. He's no longer recording music, so it's nice to see
Absolutely. His younger clone is continuing to record. He's the new man version, and he's also got someone selling pills for erectile dysfunction, I think, as well.
It takes all sorts.
10th of April, there was Sleepers.
Okay.
Do you want to tell us the plot of this, Graham?
Yeah, okay. So get this. In post-Glasnost Moscow, the KGB stumble across an old disused training facility recreating 1960s London. They soon discover that the purpose of the facility was to integrate KGB agents into British society. 2 of these agents are still missing 25 years later. In fact, the 2 agents have become integrated into British society so well, they themselves have forgotten the reason they were sent there in the first place. They are as British as the British as far as they are concerned. British as the British. One of them, Jeremy Coward, has become a successful city financier with a string of girlfriends, a posh car and a studio apartment. The other, Albert Robinson, is a hardworking moderate trade unionist living in Eccles in the north of England with a wife, children and a council house. What an oddly complex setup for a show that is.
It really is. I quite like it though. It sounds quite interesting. But it reminded me, it's really similar to The Americans, the show that came out obviously not quite recently with Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys about 2 US, Russian sleeper agents in America. They know they're Russian sleeper agents though.
They haven't forgotten.
No, they haven't forgotten.
Would you forget that? Is that something you forget? You get so ingrained into British society that you forget you were a spy?
A Russian spy?
I mean, it seems odd that, you'd become a trade unionist so well in Eccles that you would forget that you were actually an indoctrinated spy.
And not just one, but 2 of them.
I mean, that's good training.
Forget.
I mean, but it says they created 1960s London, but that guy ended up living in Eccles, so we wouldn't have a clue what he was doing. So something went wrong.
That would be really niche. The KGB stumbled across an old disused training facility recreating 1960s Eccles.
in a council house. Can you imagine the 2 different rooms? Right. So you're in that room. That's the 1960s London. Where am I? You're in that room. That's the 1960s Eccles. But this is very elaborate and posh. Yeah, in there you've got 3 ducks on the wall and a fireplace with a nice mantle. Oh, here you go. Off you go.
And some cake.
Yeah, 2 up, 2 down. There's no central heating in that one either.
No. And
you have to shit outside.
Absolutely. And you've got to become a trade unionist.
But don't worry, in 25 years, you'll forget all about this.
You won't know what's going on, who we are, or what's happened.
Weird.
Very weird.
Does that happen? I mean, it seems odd that you would forget your training 25 years later, because that seems like it would be quite important training, learning to speak English and living in another culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Eccles in 1960. It is 1960 in Eccles. You can't have been born. You weren't born yesterday, were you?
You're 33.
You've got an oddly strong Russian accent for a man from Eccles.
I'm a trade unionist. We all have this accent.
I work for the trade union.
Okay. Yeah, well, I kind of want to watch it though, just to see how weird it is. But
he's introduced his kids. These are my kids. This is my wife. That's Sophia, and there's my children. Glasnost,
Perestroika,
and, Perestroika, Striker,
Boff.
The old gags, they never die, do they? Okay.
They never die. No.
So go and watch The Americans.
Yeah, it's much better. 12th of April, Finders Keepers. Do you seem to remember this? I don't.
Well, no, I didn't remember this. I remembered the Richard Stilgoe BBC version from 1982, which was Finders Keepers, Losers. A show so cheap that he sang the opening theme with his keyboard at the start. The bloody BBC are cheapskates, aren't they? So because he sits on like a Bontempi keyboard at the beginning and plays the opening theme, boo boo, Finders Keepers, where that's Richard Stilgoe, and he's like, and he puts it to one side. He's like, "Hello, welcome to this." Like, God, how cheap is that? He played his own intro music. Goodness me!
And for a microsecond, Les Dawson popped up on it.
It's just like you don't get much lower budget than getting your host to play his own theme.
It's falling through time.
It's ridiculous. But anyway, so I thought it was that, but it isn't. It turns out it's an ITV version of an American TV type show with Neil Buchanan hosting it. Of course it was Neil Buchanan because he hosted everything on Kids ITV, didn't he?
Yeah.
And it came back, apparently went away and came back a few years later as well. So I'm guessing it's one of those big multi-facet sort of loads of kids in the studio, loads of silly games going on kind of thing. No doubt.
Probably.
It did remind me, though, by the way, of a time when I was hosting when my kids were little. We held a big party for about 20 kids on a particular birthday, and we decided to play a game of Finders Keepers, but what I called Find the Quid. And actually, those kids tore this house apart like a bunch of savage monkeys. It was savage. It was really savage.
Give them the pound. Probably less damage.
It was so damaging. I ended up inventing a game of a musical statues variant where they were listening to System of a Down, which kind of worked for a bit actually at that time. Kind of worked for a bit
until the mums came round and they were all stood in the corner crying.
They were partially deaf, but they did learn to pogo and bounce. Let me tell you that.
There were a few deaths involved.
Yeah, there weren't. Thank God. No,
there wasn't. No. 12th of April, The Sharp End.
Ooh, sounds painful.
Never heard of this. Never heard of it. What is it? British television comedy starring Gwen Taylor. What is this? BBC One comedy. Never heard of it. It's going to be rubbish, isn't it?
Written by Clark and directed by Brian Parker and David Penn. Ran for 8 episodes, which tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. So
8 episoder. I don't know. It just sounds very dreary, and it doesn't sound funny at all.
No. A recent widow decides to take on the running of her late husband's debt collection agency. Now, there is a recipe for comedy, if ever I've heard one.
Just pause there, because I feel like my sides are going to split with the hilarity of that situation. What's funny about that?
Don't know.
I bet she says lots of jokes like, "Oh, Derek wouldn't have liked it that way."
No. However, a decision to do this was much to the displeasure of her more ruthless business rival, Martin Brown, who tried everything in his power to close her business down. This is comedy. It's just, the jokes write themselves.
I'm telling you, I bet it's as good as anything that BBC produces. 40 Towers, isn't it? It's that level of quality humour there.
Christ on a bike. Who greenlit that shit?
Somebody with no sense of humour, that's who.
No.
Somebody literally sat on the sharp end of a pencil, I think, and is dubris.
14th of April, tonight at 8:30.
Okay. No, see, I would never have watched this because this is so outside of my wheelhouse. Even now, I wouldn't watch it.
This is a cycle of 10 one-act plays by Noel Coward, presented in London in 1936 and in New York in 1936-1937, with the author and Gertrude Lawrence in the leading roles. The plays are mostly comedies. I
seem to remember a lot of comedians post this, doing lots of impressions of Noel Coward and this good, how intimidably you behave and all that kind of thing. So I just remember lots of comedians. So it must have had a bit of cultural resonance.
What did you just say?
I'm not even sure. But I'm not famous for my Noel Coward impression.
Whatever that was you just said, I've been sat here while you've been talking going, what's he just said?
Most people feel that way when they've heard Noel Coward. So I feel my impression was obviously very... how inimitable we behave is what I said. But that's the kind of effect. That's the Noel Coward effect. You see, that's how good my impression was. You don't realise it. I blew your mind then. So accurate it was that it confused you in the same way that he does.
I forgot where I was and what I was doing and who I am.
That's the power of a good impersonator.
Absolutely. For a moment there, I thought I was living in Eccles.
Well, I hate to break this to you, but
this is how
25
they did
years
it.
ago. This is how we trained you 25 years ago.
They just did shit Noel Coward impressions at them.
Yeah, exactly.
So they just broke their brains. Went, I don't know where I am. What's going on?
Hey, don't you be calling my Noel Coward impersonation shit. I'll tell you that was accurate.
I couldn't tell you. I can't remember. Who am I?
Damn your impudence.
What are we doing?
I don't know.
30th of April. See, that was probably funnier than any of those comedies.
Yeah, absolutely.
30th of April, finally, just to round off, this big break started. This hasn't aged well, mostly because it was hosted by Jim Davidson.
Yeah, who is and was. Oh, certainly was. Certainly, I don't know now. I don't even know what he does now. I guess he's still.
He's even worse these days. So he's always been. He's a dreadfully racist, xenophobic comedian.
Yeah, of the kind of. There's an ilk of comedy that came out, spurned around the 70s to 80s, and he was a part of that younger generation of that, actually, which, arguably should have known a lot better. Why they chose him to host this show, I don't know. It was a snooker-based game show. Wasn't my bag at all, and then it did have the theme tune by Chaz and Dave as well, didn't it?
It's only a game sport. That one, do.
We're gonna be snookering you tonight, and then I always hoped that at a certain point Jim Davison would have cracked an inappropriate joke, and John Virgo would have just smashed him over the head with a triangle, and said you're snookered, mate, and that would have been too cool, wouldn't it? That never happened,
or just took his sock off and filled it with a red and a white.
Yeah, he watched Scum recently because he does that in Scum, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, and just smacked him around the head. Not that I'm advocating violence.
No, not at all. But if John Virgo takes off his sock, the audience are going to be unconscious 2 seconds later because that guy's got smelly feet.
It really has.
From what I've heard, I can't prove that. Nor would I want to. But no, if he's tooling up for a dust up, you're doomed. The guy's a 6-foot giant, and if he didn't eat with a snooker cue, but he was going to snooker ball sock you. Jim Davison's not going to be doing all of his hokey cokey nonsense after that, is he? He'll be lucky if he don't. He'll breathe okay as long as no one unplugs him. Yeah,
John Virgo looks suspiciously like the Cyclops in Krull.
He does. Goodness me, yeah. Rel, is it his name? Rel?
Yeah, Bernard Bresslaw. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, his name's not Bernard Bresslaw. That's the actor that played him.
No, it ain't.
But in all fairness, John Virgo would have been a better proposition. He does have one eye. Remember. I mean, I know it looks like he's got two on telly, but he's actually just got the one. He's just very clever and work with mirrors.
He's got a mirror in the middle of his forehead.
Yes, he's monocular. Unfortunately, he is monocular. He's not biocular, he's monocular. It's the thing, but that's what made him very accurate at snooker. He only had to look like one eye.
Yeah, he never had to close the other one to get that depth perception straight down the cue.
Exactly, but he could be defeated by a simple hand of pocket sand. As could all Cyclops, just so you know, in case you ever encounter any.
Yeah, they're always that's their weak point.
Exactly. You're just like, what's that over there? Pocket sand. Ah!
That's my good eye. You mean your only eye? Mm.
you keep that in your trousers, Cloppy.
Oh. Anyway, that's it. That's the TV. Oh, God, it's rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah, we made better TV by making up shit along the way.
We did. We're going to go away, take a quick break after that.
A big break.
Yeah, we're going to come back. We've still got 3 games left. Please, God help us. Hopefully they're all right. We'll see you in a minute. Bye. And we're back. We've still got 3 games left to go. 3 games, yeah. I'm sorry. I think I've got a cold, so I've got a bit of a sniffle, so I do apologise if you're hearing that. But don't worry, it's just, I'm still good. 3 games. Let's get to that first one. Graham, the first one, this is Saint Dragon. That's a weird name for a game.
Saint Dragon. I quite like it for that.
Yeah, it's quite unusual. So it was not long ago, Graham, that we rode on the back of a dragon in a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. And that game was Dragon Breed. And we thought it was pretty good. We quite enjoyed it. Now we actually get to be the dragon in another side-scrolling shooter with a dragon. Yeah, but this time it's Saint Dragon, or to give it its original name, Tensai Ryu Saint Dragon.
Ah.
There you go. This is another arcade conversion made and released by Jaleco in 1989. It was ported to plenty of systems, Amiga, ST, C64, the MSX, Spectrum, TurboGrafx 16, and the Amstrad. Since then, has also seen releases on both the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4. In Japan, Game Machine listed Saint Dragon on their April 1st, 1989 issue as being the 6th most successful table arcade unit at the time. It's not bad. It's not bad. So this was £10.99, another full price. It got 55%. 664 conversion, a load of credits to it. It was published by Storm. Didn't he work for you? Or did she work for you?
Yes. That was my demo coding buddy.
Yeah, and this looks like their first release, but certainly not their last because there's quite a few under them. And this was developed by Random Access, produced by the Sales Curve, with code by Warren Mills, graphics by Robert Whittaker, and music by Paul Tong. Now, Warren Mills, it will probably not surprise you, did Silkworm.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense now.
And Robert Whittaker and Paul Tong have worked on games like Knack, among others, of varying quality. So yeah, it is what it is. Saint Dragon then, what's it all about? What is it all about, this game? According to the instructions, on a far distant planet, you must prepare to fight the final battle. An evil force of monster machines has risen to conquer the galaxy. One by one, the peaceful races of the galaxy have been attacked and enslaved by the cyborg monsters. None has the strength to stand against the power of the cyborgs until one lone rebel rises from within the ranks of the mechanized monsters. Mechanized monsters. Part dragon, part machine, the cyborg warrior fights back against its tyrant masters. The galaxy has a hero. Hope returns to the hearts of the people at the rise of the armored champion they call Saint Dragon. This is where it gets a bit odd. In this reverse of the St. George legend, you must fly the armored dragon ship through 5 levels of non-stop destruction. Choose between fireballs, bouncing bombs, ring lasers, and turret weapons to blast your way through the armored pumas, mechanical cobras, giant cyborg bull, and a host of other mutant machines. But remember, firepower isn't everything. Your ship has an armored tail. Use it well, and you may just survive. I don't know what that means, but it's a reverse of the St. George legend. I don't remember armored pumas, mechanical cobras in the Legend of St. George. So I'm not quite sure about that, but anyway, whatever. The game has an interesting loading screen showing a mecha cat digging its claws into the head of a dragon. It's kind of an odd one. I've just got a cat, and I can feel that dragon's pain because our cat likes to dig its claws into my thigh. It's it's always painful. It's colourful and odd. There's no title on it though. I can't think. It's just this picture. It's kind of weird. I can't say I've seen anything like it before. Anyway, I played both the disc and cartridge version for this. The disc version did have some bug fixes which were listed. They were not fixed in the cartridge version, but playing the cartridge version, I never really noticed them, so I'm not sure. Maybe there are some bugs. I don't know. Once it loads, we get the title screen. This has got the name in Chinese writing. It's the same as the arcade title screen, really. Except the arcade game's got kind of this sort of fire effect in the background. We don't have that on here. We have this kind of star effect. Then it's got the name in English, some credits, and an invitation to press fire to play. And like I said, there's a star field coming out the centre of the screen. It's nice. And there's some solid music as well. It's reminiscent of the arcade title screen, like I said, and it flicks back and forth with the high score table. It's a typical arcade conversion title front end. There's not much else to do. Press fire, get going. Okay. So, this is a left to right scrolling shooter, and it starts with our dragon snaking onto the screen from the left. It's not as big as the dragon we controlled in Dragon Breed. It's quite small. It's got like 4 sections to its tail, I guess.
Yeah,
but it controls well, and it's snappy to move about. The sort of tail, so you move the head and the tail follows around you, kind of like what we saw in Dragon Breed, but smaller. So it's almost like that, and like
not as flickery.
This is solid. There's no flickering going on here. It's like the extra weapons you get in Salamander and stuff. They follow you around. It's that sort of thing. So controls are standard, 8-way controls. Up, down, left, right, diagonals, and fire shoots your weapon. And there's no, you don't need anything else. Your weapon starts out quite small. It's a small plasma bolt and a small fireball. So you fire them both at the same time. It follows typical shooter logic that we've talked about loads of times before, with enemies coming on from the right and you blasting the shit out of anything that moves. You just shoot anything and everything. The enemies fly in waves. They come in different sort of patterns, and there's some of them they walk along the floor and the ceilings to fire missiles and bombs at you, blow everything up. There are power-ups to collect. from that you shoot these pods and they sort of release a power up, and these are activated immediately upon collection. Style of loads for the shooters, you don't have to press space or anything, it just instantly starts. So the power ups are represented by letters. So the letters for the power ups: I, N. This adds one more set of pulse torpedoes, so a maximum of 5. So your first ones are quite small. As you get more of them, they spread out. So it's kind of like, you get fan sort of effect. So, firing at angles, so diagonals. So it's kind of, you get a spread laser, basically, spread shot. L changes your the fireball you shoot through the middle. It changes to a laser. F changes it back to a fireball. B changes it to a bouncing ball. T changes it to a turret. S is a speed up. P is power up your extra weapon, so the fireball or the laser or the bouncing ball gets bigger. And H is hyper, which is invulnerability plus maximum firepower for limited time. That's kind of nice. You can have a spread, it says, of up to 5 plasma bolts and a powered up extra weapon as well. So you can actually become pretty powerful in this. And you have to hammer the fire button. It's not a hold down one. So you hammer in the fire button and you're spewing out a lot of firepower, which is cool. I always like that in a game like this. It doesn't take you long as well to get quite powered up. Something they said in the review in Zapped, which was a bit of a negative. I was like, I like being powered up. So the body of your dragon, as noted, is also invulnerable. So you only die if you get hit in the head by an enemy or by bullets. So it's
always the real stopper.
It is, yeah. So you can usually your tail to sort of loop around yourself and sort of act as a bit of a shield. The game takes up almost all the screen, which is good. The UI is just a single line of text at the bottom showing which player it is. I'm not sure if this is 2-player or not. I don't know if it was. I didn't note that down. So it says player 1. So I'm guessing there might be a 2-player. Your score and how many lives you have left by little icons. Nice and simple. You don't need much. That's all you need. The game itself is quite busy. And some of the enemies you encounter are pretty big. The huge mecha cats, for example, as you're going along, and some of the flying enemies in later levels. And I did notice that at times there is some slowdown. It's infrequent. It doesn't happen all the time. It's usually when one of the big enemies turn up and there's a couple of waves on screen. It can get a bit juddery, but it passes and then it's back to normal, so it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And that was the standard cart version. I don't know if they fixed that in the disc version. So it's all right. It's pretty good. But there is a lot because you can fire a lot of bullets. It's not a case of your bullets have to wait till they go off screen. They fire as fast as you can hammer that fire button, which is handy. So it's technically pretty good, I thought. The music that plays throughout is decent enough. If you don't want it, you can switch to sound effects by pressing M. You can't have both together, but the sound effects are pretty decent too. The visuals on the dragon and enemies, they've obviously taken a C64 downgrade from the arcade original, although they were quite big. But this is kind of like what we saw for Silkworm. So having that extra space on screen by having smaller sprites and things is quite good because it gives you more space to avoid stuff and fly around, and you don't have to worry too much because you'll crash if you go into the floor, but flying into scenery and stuff generally doesn't kill you. So that's kind of handy. That's kind of handy as well. There are 5 levels to blast your way through. Each level having a large boss to take out that appears with I like the way these appear. If you are susceptible for the flashing screens, then be careful because the bosses appear and it sort of flashes black and white for a second or so. It's like as they appear. I quite liked it. I'm not susceptible to it, but you might be, so just be careful. But it's impressive. I liked it. It's like a big. I don't think we've seen that before with this on the C64. This kind of like the openings, like it's quite interesting. Yeah. The 5 levels you go through, they see you progressing through a forested area, then there's some weird purple caves, then to a sort of mechanized level. Level 4 sees us going through like a frozen blue flame level. And the final level is like another mechanized level before we face off against the final boss. If you beat them, there's a nice little animated scene where your dragon flies up off the planet for some reason and you get a congratulatory message. So, it's all there. As noted in the Zapped review, it's not a massively difficult game, this. It's not overly hard. We've played far too many shooters where they're stupidly hard. But this one feels fair, and it's a decent level of challenge. The waves that come at you are the same as the arcade, just smaller for the most part. And it's a solid port, this, of another entry in our Arcade Obscura. This is pretty obscure. I'd never heard of it, I have to say. It's pretty good. It's not top tier left to right shooter material, but it's a decent port. And for the time I spent with this, I had some fun. The graphics are decent throughout. There's some impressive sprite work later on. Some of the bigger sprites I thought were really good. Some of the bigger ones when they come flying on, especially sort of in level 3, where there's some nice sort of circling enemies that come around you and some other bits and bobs going on. And and in level 2, I think you're getting like bombarded with sort of rocks and stuff on the floor, and you have to kind of dodge them. And there's some nice little sequences in this, and I think it does the arcade pretty proud. And it's annoying that you lose all your weapons when you die.
Yeah.
That's always frustrating. But you do get to keep them when progressing from one level to the next, which I did like. Because on a lot of games of this ilk, you lose them. So that's quite good that you keep them. The end bosses are okay, not too tough. And you can get past them quite well. You just blast the shit out of them. And this seems like a well-balanced blaster. You will make progress with this. I found myself enjoying this and been back to it a couple of times since we played it, since I played it for the review. And I would go back to this more than things like IO, and it's that kind of ilk, where their stupid difficulty level is off-putting. This is all right. This just feels like a nice, approachable shooter. It's $10.99. Maybe it's a decent port, this, but I can kind of understand that at £11, maybe that's a bit much to ask for this. I think for a kind of a weird, obscure, but decent enough shooter that probably not many people have heard of. I don't know what price point you put on this, because obviously all arcade conversions are going at this price. And you'd probably get some enjoyment out of it. 5 levels. You would probably get through this quite quickly, I think. But I think you'd have a good time. I just think £11 is just too much to ask, really. This would be, when this hits budget, and it probably will, this will be a great buy. And I think, £3, you pick this up a budget, you'll have a great time with it. £11, just a bit too much, I think, for what is really here. Then there's games like, Armorlight and things like that, which you could go play, which are probably better left to right shooters. But as a port of a obscure arcade game, it does everything you're asking for. It's like what we saw from Silkworm, solid shooter that works to the machine's strengths, doesn't try and do too much, but is enjoyable to play. I enjoyed it. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, basically the same. I thought it was just it was too expensive for what it was, and I thought that the score in Zapped was a little bit harsh, because I was quite impressed with it. I thought if you play it for what it is, this is actually quite a neat shooter, and obviously reminiscent of the other one we played. But I really enjoyed what there was in here. This was a good in for shooters. It wasn't obtusely difficult. The mechanics of it felt quite nice. It had all the component parts in there. It was just a bit pricey for what it offered, and it wasn't doing anything original, was it? It was nothing. Graphics were okay in terms of some of the sprites, but the actual backgrounds were a bit weird.
Yeah, they're a bit odd.
So, but I don't know. I've never even heard of the arcade, ever. So I don't know if this is a lot like the arcade, and I'm guessing it probably is. It's just a bit late to the party. We've said this for a few now. This just feels a bit late to the party. If this had come out around the same time as Salamander and a few of those others, this would have been a welcome addition to that canon. But this late in the day, you've got such stiff competition out there for this at this price that you probably, budget's the place for this. And I think as a budget game, it would be a really good. It would have been in the good league of budget games, wouldn't it? So I liked it. Graphics good, sound was good. I quite like the soundscapes and things. All the component parts were there. It was not a terrible game. It wasn't 55% worth of terrible either.
No, I think they're a bit harsh on it.
I think a lot harsh, really, because there's been games that have been getting much higher scores that were nowhere near as what I felt was reasonably well polished. I mean, the movement of the main character was snippy. It was, it felt like there was quite a lot going on the screens. I thought there was a lot going for this. I think it just suffered from being a bit out of its time and therefore out of its price. But other than that, if we could move the clock back and release this in 1989 or 1988 or whenever the year Armorlight and a few of those others were coming out, it wouldn't necessarily be in the same category as that, but it would have been certainly in the league of really good shoot-ups off the time. So I think it does what it does. Maybe a little bit short, but whatever. It's still pretty good. I quite enjoyed it for what it was. Yeah. And a good name, Saint Dragon. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Unusual one. Yeah, there you go. It's all right. You will play this. You will enjoy it. I think so anyway, because it is perfectly enjoyable. But no more. There we go. That's the first one. This part. Let's move on to our second game. And this is an odd half. This is an odd section.
It is.
Graham, it's over to you to tell us all about Kentucky racing.
do you know, where do you even begin with this? So I suppose let's just start with the obvious things. So this was a budget game. It was published by Alternative Software and developed by Bizarre Developments. Now, the coder was Michael Lister. He did Huxley Pig.
Yeah.
And the graphics are by somebody called Edvard de Medbested. I don't know how you say his name, but Edvard does something like that. But this is only one he did. Title screen is Paul A. Bellamy. He did Huxley Pig, and the musician was also Paul A. Bellamy, who also did, I believe, something to do with Huxley Pig. So this is, how do you even describe this weirdness? So I'm going to go just with the blurb, because the blurb is short for this, okay? Mm-hmm. And it says, they're off and running. Roll up, roll up, roll up for a game packed with fun, excitement, action, and that all-important addictive, very addictive quality. You, sir, yes, you, pull up the seat, rest your feet, and get ready to race and race and race. 9 exciting courses, racing the most famous events in the racing calendar. Doncaster, Cheltenham, Ascot, Eglinton, Longchamp, Kempton, Rome, Aintree, Kentucky. That's in the Kentucky Derby. Eccles. The link, and this is in races such as the Lincoln, the Gold Cup, the Windsor Castle Stakes, Edlington Open, the Prix Saint-Romain, the Easter Stakes, the Premio Paroli, the Grand National, of course, and the Kentucky Derby. Big horse races. It's an horse racing game. For horses. Break out your horses. Get your saddles out. You can enter your own horse in all these exciting races if you want to. This is all the fun of the fair with the enthralling head-to-head horse racing game. Wait a minute. All the fun of the fair? Pitch your skills against a friend and the computer or 2 computer opponents. Right. So this is on paper a horse racing game, but this is not a horse racing game. What this is a fun fair type game where there are horses that race that represent a different thing. This is a game what I would like to call ball in a hole. So this is ball in a hole, and the ball in the hole powers horses that run across the screen. That's the nature of this game. The more balls you get in holes, the faster your horses will go, and then you'll win the race. And the idea is to win the horse race. Any one of those amazing 9 races you can win in this bizarre ball-in-hole fashion. It says the basic instructions are the basic instructions here. It says when the menu page appears, press 1 or 2 player, and that's what you do have to do. Choose 1 or 2 player. A pointer will indicate the current option. Move the pointer by pressing the space key and then enter to confirm your choice. I feel like the controls are over-explained at this point to take up space, and not the controls that an explanation that you need. Then you've got to choose whether you want the easy or hard game. The easy game will generously allow you to become second without losing a credit. Well, for a while at least. In the hard game, you must win each race or it's thank you and good night. The hard game also calls for pinpoint accuracy on your part as the opposition is very good. Circa never misses. Mm-hmm. By rolling the ball into one of the holes in your table, your horse will advance accordingly. Only certain holes will allow your horse to jump fences. So that's your instructions for this weirdness. So this is so I think the best way I can describe this is actually a sub-game from probably something else that's been made and released into an actual game. So this does not have enough legs to be a really full game. So this is, imagine this is a bonus. This is an escaped bonus level from something. Or this is an escaped in between interstitial level. There's no way I've seen things like this in bigger games when this is the bit you do between the 2 levels or something like that. So what you're presented with once you've got through those choices, after you've named your horse, which by the way, you can type in letters, but you can't delete, which is annoying. So I ended up with...
Can you not? I didn't notice.
No, you can't delete. So I ended up typing in, I had a horse called Egg Yolk. And was he going to stand a chance against Rogers Nag and White Heat? Well, let's find out, shall we, in this race. So the way this game presents itself when you get to this point, so I'll explain what on earth this craziness is, but when the game starts, across the top of the screen, there is the horse race, essentially. And this is a strip across the top. There's 3 horses at the right-hand side. There's 2 jumps, and there's a long strip, and that's essentially the horse race. It's not round in a circle, it's a line. And at the end of that line, that's the finish line. So that's it. Underneath that, there are 2 tables which look a bit like pinball tables, one on the left, one on the right, I'm guessing for 2 players. So you only use the one on the left if you're playing 1 player, and the computer does the opposite one if you've got CPU player. Now, and then between those 2, there's a relatively badly drawn announcer of a kind of a horse racing announcer graphic with the kind of hat on that you'd expect. Not quite John McCruick, but that kind of idea, that kind of person. Mm-hmm. And there they go, and that kind of guy, the guy that does that. He doesn't have any speech or anything. It's a speech bubble there with limited text in there. So the horse, the horses are almost ready and they're off. And then at this point, you might be thinking, wow, it's a horse race game. And that's where you're wrong. So your hand will appear on the left-hand side and then there will be a kind of a target dot that moves left and right. And you have to press the fire button down to release, to engage more power, and that will then throw the ball in that direction. And then on the pinball table, such as it's just kind of describe it as one, there's a series of holes all across the table, which shall then move the horse on to varying different levels. So the further away you go in the tiny holes, you get the ball in there, the horse moves a bit further. If you get in the holes that are more towards you, which are easy to get to, the horse won't move as far. And the idea is that you're throwing the ball into the holes to move your horse. Your opposition is throwing the balls into their holes to move their horse, and that's the horse race. That's what this game is. It's that. Mm-hmm. So it's ball in hole featuring horses. And that is it. That is what this game is, that. And you win the race, and you win credits, and you go to the next race, and you can work your way through all those races, race 1 to 2. There's odds in this for reasons that I'm not exactly sure of, because you can't bet on anything.
No, it's very strange.
So I thought maybe there's a betting component to this game, then maybe, but there isn't any of that. This is literally a ball in hole game. So you throw the ball, and that moves the horse, which then wins the race. And if you win that race, you go to the next race. And if you don't, oh well, you don't win. And would you like to do it again? What a weird thing this really is. I don't know what the genesis of this is, where it came from. It's pitched very much on the cover as a horse racing game. There's pictures of horses and racing and everything else. And Kentucky racing would mean that you would, bear in mind, you only spend 1/9 of your time in Kentucky. So arguably that's a lie. You spend less time in Kentucky or no more time than any other place. It could have been called Doncaster racing for all the difference it makes. I don't understand why they've pitched it as kind of a circus game, although I suppose this is more aligned to a fun fair type idea. But that's not the way that it's been pitched. This is meant to look like it's a horse racing game. In reality, it's not. And even on the screen grabs on the back, you can sort of see that, but it still kind of elides what it really is. And it's just a whirling mass of obscure nonsense, which kind of explains what this game is. Graphically, this is just very basically drawn, not very good. The race and there's no horse animations or anything like you'd expect for a game like this. So you've just got these stilted sort of horses that kind of judder across as you throw your ball into the holes. There's a bit of physics on the ball, but it's not accurate and not Earth-based physics that I could identify. So, for some reason, if you put too much power on it, it would fling it all over the place. It wouldn't necessarily follow the arc. The angle that you're throwing at makes no sense for the physics anyway. And so really, it's just a game of, look, it's basic luck, and maybe you'll get it there, maybe you won't. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just who can be lucky the most and it's arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary. In fact, everything about this game is arbitrary. It's literally the most meaningless thing ever. None of the things it says it actually is. Is it a horse racing game? No. Is it a ball in hole game? No. Do you accumulate score? No. Do you win anything? No. Is there any money involved? No. Why do you display odds for the horses when it means nothing? Why is my horse 100 to 1 and another one 20 to 1? Why? What does it mean? That means it's the favourite. Why is it the favourite if the odds are exactly the same for each of us? Put it on difficulty onto the more complex difficulty, and it's impossible because the CPU will not miss a hole. And the horse races across there like someone's just kicked it up the arse and injected it with some kind of stimulant. So the only thing you can say about this is that it exists, that somebody made it, and for reasons I'm not exactly sure, I couldn't really accurately identify what the audience is for this. This is, I am 100% certain, something that somebody made as a quick knock-up for maybe a little test of some logic. This was never meant to be released, I don't think, really. I think they've just saw it and thought, you know what, someone will probably buy that, put it out on budget. Why not? So this is embarrassing by budget standards. The graphics are what they are, but there's not much thought or anything gone into this. It is literally 3 or 4 screens and no game logic other than ball in hole, move horse. What a weird thing that is, isn't it? Who thought that was the thing? Since when has horse racing and pitch and toss been conjoined? I don't know. Maybe people dig it. I'm not one of them, though. I have no chance of doing this, and I have to say my beloved egg yolk, the famous racehorse, didn't do diddly squat thanks to my crappy physics. So, like I said, what is there to say about this other than I thought this was the weirdest game we were going to play this episode? Wrong can you be about things like that? So no, did I enjoy my trip from Doncaster to Kentucky? No, I didn't. This is weird and it makes no sense and it contains nothing that makes it interesting or fun other than the novelty of throwing a ball in a hole for a while. But did you get anything from it other than that?
Did you never play these in the arcade?
No, I don't remember ever playing. I'm playing bowling hall, but never horse racy bowling.
Yeah, have you never played them in the arcade? Yeah, you'd roll the ball and there'd be like one to the front, 2 to the middle, 3 to the back, and there'd be about 10 horses. You'd be playing with about 15 people, and they'd all be going it. The 15 horses moving across the top.
I'm aware of that part of it, but I just remember it. I remember the one where you put the little 2Ps in and the thing goes round.
No. This was because I used to play this loads.
And the one I have,
these
well,
in the
the
arcade.
variation of this, the only variation I've seen of this is where you have to shoot water out of a water pistol into like a hole, and that moved your horse along.
So basically, there was in the arcades. They used to have it in Cleethorpes, but the thing was in the arcades, like I said, there was usually you're playing against 15 other people because there's 15 horses. They all go up, and then you roll. It's that combination of trying to get the ball in the hole, as you say, but you're really doing it. And
I imagine there's a lot of fun in the arcade.
Absolutely, I used to love playing them, and I've played lots of versions. I played horses, I played camel races, all kinds of ones. I played loads of these different ones. I used to play them in any arcade I could find, and I never knew there's a version of this on the C64. So I was actually because
there isn't.
I love these games in the arcade. I love it. At least I do in their natural environment. Back of an arcade, 10, 15 other people all just rolling balls down the chutes, trying to get your horse or camel. And it's brilliant.
Sure, the winter evening just fly by.
They were ace. So when I saw what type of game this was, I was bemused because I was like, sure, how can someone make this for the 64? And yet, because I'm an idiot or whatever, I found myself having some stupid fun with this for a few races because I just love this kind of notion of the physics are rubbish. I know the visuals are not very good. The sound ain't great. The virtual notion of getting the ball in the hole and being instantly rewarded by seeing my horse Ballsy. My horse was called Ballsy. It was quite funny hearing him going, Ballsy's in the lead. Ballsy texter.
No, I think that's in your head. That's not, the guy just sort of ticker tapes that across.
But move forward a bit was satisfying in a way I've not experienced the last time I played one of these. For me, this is an absolutely 100% subjective reaction to this.
Completely.
Yes, so I'll come to the objective reaction in a moment, but there's a brief bit of fun I had with this because it brought back some very happy memories of playing this in the arcades, moving a wooden horse, rolling balls, and objectively, it ain't very good. And I completely agree with everything you say. Absolutely, 100%. It's niche, it's odd, it feels like it's a bonus level in between something else where should be something else.
It's like some sort of Mario Party, but nowhere near as good as that.
Yeah, there should be more horses on screen. I don't know. Maybe in two player, might have a bit of a laugh. I don't know if because these kind of things always work that way. I don't know. It's too easy as well. I was winning races easily in no time. It's just a weird. Why would anybody make this? I don't understand.
No idea.
But yeah, you are absolutely 100%. You are correct in everything you said. It is a weird, pointless exercise, but. Subjectively, because it brought back some happy
invoked memory
memories.
of happy times. Yeah,
which I used to love.
It wasn't based on any of that game, but it brought back that trope for you, which is nice.
Yeah, and that was good sort of thing. So I was sat here smiling, playing it, and going, "Good Lord!" And I was like, I used to love these, and I'd happily if I found one of them in some obscure arcade now, I would be a very happy boy.
Probably got real horses in it now, man.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, Kentucky Racing though, I mean, it's in and of itself. If you bought this for £3, you wouldn't be particularly happy, I don't think.
You would not.
Not really. There you go. That's Kentucky Racing. Weird. Will it get weirder? Let's find out. Well, yes, it will. Yeah,
absolutely, it will.
You thought that game was hard to describe. So this is Exterminator. Some of you may know this one. Another, I didn't. This was £10.99. It got 69%. As if Saint Dragon wasn't arcade obscura enough for you. Then here is Exterminator. This was from Gottlieb.
Then.
You may recognise Gottlieb. Their most famous arcade game, looking at them, was Cubert.
Yes, that rings a bell.
That was 1983. Then they also did Mad Planets, 1983, and they also did a version of Krull.
Oh dear.
There was an arcade version of Krull. They didn't really do much else after that in terms of arcades because they were pinball makers mostly.
Right.
But in 1989, they released this into the arcade for some odd reason. This was published by Audiogenic. There's some names attached to this as well. This was producer was Gary Scheinwald. The coders were Douglas Hare and Gary Liddon.
Wowzer. Okay.
Douglas Hare did IO. It's weird that the name IO gets mentioned twice in this episode. And Gary Liddon obviously worked on a few titles, but was also as an ex-Zapped staff, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Graphics are by Paul
Okay.
And the music
is Dave. Actually,
and the music is Dave Whitaker.
Yeah, I could sort of tell.
That's an impressive team, really, for this. And Okay, so what the hell is Exterminator? Is it a conversion of the film, as we said last week? No, it's not. The premise is thus. It was a summer's day, Graham, in a quiet street in a leafy Chicago suburb. Suddenly, the tranquility was disturbed by a piercing scream. Help me! Help me! Houses were infested with mutant insects and crazy cans. Even the toy tanks had come to life. This wasn't a job for just any pest control man. It was a job for the Exterminator.
If you're lying, he'll be back.
Yeah, this is a nice front end. With some text appearing saying he wasn't just any pest control man. He was. Then we get a big Exterminator logo and a skull drops in to fill in for the O at the end. It's nice. It looks cool. And there's a jaunty bit of Whittaker music playing as well. Good. Front end quality continues with an impressive high score table and credits. There's some, obviously what you'd expect from the people who did I.O. And Gary Linden, the talented coders, graphics artists. You'd expect something decent, and you get that. Pressing Fire gets another good screen saying it's all up to you and whether we want to play a 1 or 2 player game. When you're chosen, the intro loads in, and we get this nice sort of screen of a suburban cul-de-sac. This yellow van drives in from the bottom. It's kind of seen sort of in 3D, and it drives in from the bottom and up the cul-de-sac and stops at the first house. The Exterminator gets out, this little character, and runs into that house. Okay. All really good. As you'd expect from Paul Doherty, it's well drawn and sets the visual tone for the game. Nice dithering, nice shading, nice, well drawn stuff here. Good use of colour. Everything's good. We then get a floor plan of the house as the game loads. It's a multi-load. Every scene loads in separately. And the kitchen is flashing on this floor plan, and that stays flashing while the level loads in the background. We don't get black screens or anything. We just get this sort of floor plan flashing until, while it loads in. So once done, the game starts. And, this is odd. It's an odd game, this. And I'll try my best to describe it. So the main game window takes up most of the screen. It's kind of on the left. It's at the bottom, sorry. And the UI is at the top. So the UI is sort of duplicated for both player 1 and player 2. And it tells us what house we're in. It tells us our score, our remaining juice. That's your health. And that's what it shows. That's all you got. There's a bar with juice in. So the game window shows a static 3D view of a kitchen. So we're just looking into this kitchen. So in front of this, at the front of this sort of 3D view, there's a giant hand floating around, and this is what we control. It's a well-drawn hand, I'll give it that. You can move the hand. Yeah, you can move the hand in front of the kitchen in 8 directions, and if you press fire, it causes it to clench into a fist, like it grabs. It does. So if you pull down, if you're far enough up from the floor, and if you pull down and press fire, you slam your fist into the ground. And if you move your hand over to the far right, then you start to shoot projectiles out of your index finger into the kitchen. Because the kitchen is filled with flying insects. They fly in and out of the screen. So they start off at the back of the kitchen. And remember, you're at the front. It's 3D. And then they fly up to the front. And when they come up to the front, you can try and move your fist to them and squish them by pressing fire. Okay. And that's what you got to do. When they're at the back of the screen, you can shoot them with the projectiles, or you can try to. It's quite hard to aim. The floor of the kitchen and all the floors in this game are tile-based. They're sort of tiles and they're different coloured. So along the floor, you'll get some cans that will be rolling towards you. And you can squash them by slamming your fist down. And this causes the tiles in that row to change colour. There are rows of colour on the floor. The way to complete the level and move on to the next room is to turn all the rows to the same colour, I think. Because it was never quite sure. I was never quite sure. It suddenly go, level completed. Sometimes I was like, okay, I don't know what I did. I don't know. You can't grab all the insects though, because wasps, you get some wasps, and like the bastards that they are, they swarm towards your hand. So the normal insects are trying to get away from your hand. The wasps will follow you, and they come straight to the front and they will follow your hand. And if you grab them, you lose juice, and your hand sort of goes, sort of flinches, throb sort of thing. It's like,
juice?
The wasp has stung you and you've lost juice. But you can replenish this by, there's these floating juice cans, and you can replenish your juice by grabbing those and squishing them. You can also swish the wasps away when they're following you by moving the joystick in a circle, and that causes your hand to wave, and it'll wave the wasp back into the background of the scene for a few seconds before they come and bother you again. You can, obviously, while the wasp's in the background, move over to the right to try and shoot it with the projectiles from your index finger. Once you've cleared the room, you move on to the next. So squishing the can, because if you grab the insects as well, they fall to the floor and they also change the color of the tiles. So smashing the cans, grabbing the insects, change the tiles. So you essentially want to grab the insects over tiles that you haven't already changed the color of. If you do it over one you have already changed the color of, I think it changes it back to the original color. So you don't want to do it in the same one. You got to sort of do it over it. You need to do it over each one separately and only do it once. Once you've cleared that room, you move on to the next, more difficult level. The one I moved on to, I got to a couple of levels in. It had spiders coming down the floor towards us. There was more weird objects that were harrying me. There was strange stuff going on. Then the other one I got to, I think it was one of the bedrooms. There were toy tanks that were coming towards you. Now you could smash them, but if they got to the floor without thinking, they would shoot at you. They would shoot sort of, turret would rotate round and shoot at you. If it hit you, you suffer a loss of juice. Should you run out of juice, then you get continues in this game. You have 3 of these, I think. So you can get to continue if you run out of juice. So you basically 3 lives. And that's kind of it. You are moving from house to house. I didn't get very far into it because it's just bloody weird and it's quite hard to control. It's an odd game. It reminded me of the other one we played ages ago. I don't know if you remember Deactivators.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's that viewpoint, that sort of looking into a room sort of from one side in 3D. It's not how it plays, though. This plays very differently. This is an arcade game. So you're moving your hand around to squish stuff. I found it a tad annoying because it doesn't feel like the collision detection for squishing the bugs is quite there. I'd be like, I'm squishing this damn thing and it's not dying. But the wasp would always bloody get me. Same with slamming your hand onto the floor. I'd be like, I'm slammed that on and I should have killed that, but it hasn't. And that's kind of it, really. Essentially, all you have to do here is squish or squash stuff over a black tile to change it and avoid squishing something on the same row. And as you get all the tiles blue, you then get a bonus. You basically goes, well done, level completed. You get a bonus, and then you move on to the next level. And that's kind of it. You do the same thing in every room. I don't think it changes very much. The visuals, nicely drawn, well drawn and animated. The hand is really good, moves around at a decent pace. There's no problems with this from a technical point of view apart from the collision detection. As I said, the speed of the game is the right side of chaotic. There is quite a lot happening on screen. The music is busy as well. It's a bit panicky, keeps you tense and on your toes. It's, in those respects, this is decent. It's a decent conversion of a relatively odd game. That's a nice idea, I guess, but I think it's one of those that doesn't quite work as well as the concept behind it. It just not quite there in its implementation. Is just not quite right. The 3D just doesn't work well enough. The presentation looks and sounds all very good, plays slickly. Everything about it is smooth from the way the sort of game introduces itself. The floor plans that come up, it's all very true to the arcade game in that way. But it's just it can get a bit too chaotic when there's stuff going on and it's not responding how you want it to. And once again, it's £11. It's too much at this point for something like this. It's too niche. Niche. Again, a budget price, you'd have a bargain. And I think you'd sort of you'd embrace the oddness of this. Full price for this, from the corner of the arcade that you probably never went in. It's just too much. If you think this is in the arcade now, but you think of the big arcade titles that you're getting converted, your Operation Wolves, your Turbo Outruns, your big games like this. This is a throwback, and it's a bit too weird. Even if this wasn't an arcade conversion, it's a weird game, and I'm sure it's got its fans, like most of these games would have, but those fans are going to be few and far between, I think. Playing it now, though, it is nice to see something different. That's always good. And it is a solid port. So, hats off to the devs. They've done a good job in porting this. I think there's just a few little technical mishaps, maybe in the original, but just grasping those insects is just a bit too more. If it was a bit more forgiving, I think this would be better. But you just feel like it's not on your side. And that gets a bit frustrating at time because it's always on your side when squishing those bloody wasps. And so, I didn't mind this. It was really weird, and I'd never heard of it. But it's like you said, like we said about Saint Dragon. It's just little bit. It's too much and too late to the party for £11 for something like this. But what about you?
No, same. Can ball in the whole horse racing be top right weirdness? Turns out it can when you've got, punch the wasps. What an odd idea. I don't know. This felt like another mini game that's escaped. This felt a little bit more. It felt a little bit more of, when you go into the arcade club, there's a whole bunch of really obscure arcades in there. And some of the modern ones, and sometimes just weird ideas get made into games, and this is another one of those. It felt a little bit reminiscent of that old game on the Spectrum where you have to smack bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that about it, but ultimately this is a weird combination of. It almost felt like a Punch the Wasp version of Guitar Hero at times. I'm like, what am I playing here?
Yeah.
So there's aspects I liked. I thought the graphics are actually pretty good for what they are. Very nicely dithered. Lots of good dithering. It's always a sign of a good artist if they do the good dithering.
Yeah, good dithering.
But ultimately, what fun was there to be had out of it? It was too weird to be sort of the thing you're going to really get into. I don't think, you're going to show this to your mate. I've just got this game. Should we check it out? And you'd be like, what the hell is this? Its component parts are in of themselves well put together. I'm just not sure what they were putting together, and I don't think they were. So you ended up with a game where, you are trying to punch wasps and crush Coke cans and on a discotheque floor. It's like, what level of drugs were on the go here? But the main problem I had, all of that's fun and fine and dandy, and we've seen really weird ideas made. We had the one where the guy was the knee with the ball on the top and all that. I'm open to there being obscure and weirdness. I like it. I like variety, and this is nothing if not that. But this is an expensive one of them, and it's very late in the day, and it's very one note for a game that is this. It's another escaped mini game. This wouldn't look out of place on a Mario Super Party or whatever, Mario Party type game where you've got all three of you are trying to very Switch and very Nintendo Wii based type. I mean, you could almost see this being played with a Wiimote and things
you
like
all
that.
had a hand each trying to grab stuff and slapping each other out the way and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So and as a precursor to that kind of logic, I suppose there is that. But at this time on the C64, and for that kind of money at this hour, it's just it's a bit too weird to be.
Can I see it?
Just a bit too weird, a bit odd. I think calling it Exterminator gives it a little bit of odd determinism, which perhaps it needed a bit more of a friendlier name for a bug swatting game, essentially. You could have called it Splat or Bug Splat or anything like that. But Exterminator just encourages man with a flamethrower torching people. It's more Judge Dredd than fly swatting. But either way, $10.99 was the wrong price. However that manifested. And that unfortunately would have meant that there was a lot of game logic which people would have looked at it and gone, However, at budget, I think you'd have had a good whack. They could have almost converted this into the logical follow-up to 180, couldn't they, if the hand was a bit more wibbly-wobbly?
They could have,
yes. But there you go. Weird, outright weird, and a double hitter of weird and weirder at the end there. But I liked what I saw in the sense that it looked nice for a C64 game. I just wasn't sure what on earth they were smoking when they thought this was an idea. Clearly, somebody was on something somewhere. But not me, though. But there you go. And also, by the way, on one of the levels, I'm pretty sure on the right-hand wall, there's a picture of a bumhole. But, you can go and explore that on screen grabs to your heart's content. But that's what it looked like to me. It looked like someone's bending over, pulled their pants down and was showing off the bumhole. But, maybe it's not that, but that's what it looks like. So, I'll go with what it is.
It's a goatsy image.
Yeah, I don't think I was ready for that. Nor in a game where you're slapping things. So, no, odd. But if you want to see something weird, well, if you don't play ball in hole horse races, then move on to this one because it just gets weirder and weirder from there.
What were the green things that were flying about that you were trying to squish into the second and third levels? I couldn't figure out what they were supposed to be.
Birds? Were they green birds? I don't know.
I honestly don't know. I don't know.
It went down an avenue. I'm not sure I was part of the avenue. I'm not sure I was bought in.
No, this is a cul-de-sac I would back out of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Turn around. You're going to bump into a Hume goo or something.
Boop, boop.
Exactly. Yeah. Slowly reverse.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, there we go. What an episode. I mean, April is distinguishing itself from March in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's got
where March was
weird.
dull. This is far from it. So what do we have?
Original ideas out there, I suppose.
Yeah, what do we have? What do we have this week then? Because that's it. We started with Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge, which was good, but almost impossible to really do it justice properly.
A competent enough port for an 8-bit machine, I think.
Yeah, Judge Dredd, which Mr. Mark by Miles.
Yeah, just all Judge and no Dredd. Yeah.
Yeah, Saint Dragon, which was a decent conversion, but too expensive for the time and a bit too late. Kentucky Racing, which was a bit expensive, even at £3 and barely a game. Although,
just go do it for real in the fun fair. It's probably way better than that.
Yeah, it is. I'll attest to that. And finally, Exterminator, which... whatever.
Weird.
just more weird. Yeah, so that's it. What we got next week. We finish off April next week. 4 more games. Again, interesting load of games. We've got Swiv.
Okay.
The Hunt for the Mighty Swiv. The Hunt for Red October.
Okay.
We return to that. Back to the Future 3.
Ah, okay.
See what that's like. And finally, Loops with a Z.
Loops. Okay. It must be modern.
It's edgy. That's what that is. Edgy. Here we go. We did all the sort of admin stuff at the beginning, didn't we? So
we did, yeah.
Nothing really much to say. A weird episode. Hope you enjoyed it. What have you? Anything you want to add, Graham, on that lot before we sort of call it an episode?
What to add? I don't know. If you want to go punch a wasp, there's a game that you can do that. If you want to go throw a ball in a hole to make a horse move for 8 pixels to the left, there's a game where you can do that as well. It's good that the C64 is so diverse in its offering that it covers the really niche kind of games. And at least one of those games has an 8-bit picture of a bumhole. And that's not something you get to say very often, is it?
Shame you don't get to roll the ball into that.
No, God, no. Oh, that's a Kentucky Fried game I never want to be part
of. Kentucky Brown Derby.
I mean, it's almost like it's like making a C64 version of beer pong. It would be utterly pointless. And that's kind of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. I mean, obviously, yeah, you do lose. I mean, you lose all that sort of social aspect of it. You lose everything. Yeah.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, in the arcade, you win mini prizes. I remember.
Yeah, you win.
I'm pretty sure I saw someone win I saw someone win nowadays tickets, but back in the old Cleethorpes days, I'm sure I saw somebody win a box of tea bags.
Quite possibly.
Because there used to be prizes like that, didn't there? Even the bingo, you'd be like, "You've won a bag of sugar, Doris. Well done."
Yeah, absolutely. I think
you used to win groceries.
You got tickets.
You used to win groceries.
You'd buy a box of broken biscuits. You'd win a box of broken biscuits.
Broken biscuits. So 3 tins of nondescript soup with no labels on the cans. What is it? Soup. What kind? I don't know. Tomato.
Soup. Soup flavour.
You want to know the flavour? That's well extra. That is.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's probably where that woman on the bus that time who tried to give us all those beans. She probably won them in the arcade. I don't know if do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. And I also remember going into an arcade, and you remember though you put the money in and the little lever pushed across, and it sort of waved its way across, and eventually, if you got it right, it would push like a little prize into the catching slot. A bit like the grabbers, but it was just like a lever that swung left and right, and you sort of moved it. I remember getting one of those, and it had what looked to me like a £5 in it. And I thought, wow, I've won a £5 note at the time, but they were quite. I thought it. When I actually got it out, it wasn't a £5 note. It was some foreign currency. I'm not even sure. It was like the Ugandan glodge or something weird. I remember going to the ticket guy at the booth saying, "No, well, this." He went, "That's worth £5, just not here, mate. Not anywhere near here." Oh, thanks for that. It is £5 though, just not in British currency. Great, there's the prize.
You should have kept it, put it to the wall.
I did for years. I had a big collection of, because my dad was, obviously, we've said many times, he was in the Navy. So I had loads of coins and things from all over the world, and I did a collection now. I'm pretty sure I didn't have, the Umbongan Dalingo, whatever it was, or the Pew or whatever it was, or whatever that bit with currency. I can't even remember now. But I just remember the guy looking at me and sort of pushing it back to me when I complained that it wasn't £5, going, "It is £5, just not from round here, mate." So there you go. Lesson learned.
They've got an answer for everything, those carnies.
Bloody shill, that bloody carny shill.
Absolutely. The next day, the whole building was gone.
Exactly.
They'd moved on.
He just laughed and then climbed into the back of his little egg booth and then just rolled away down the road.
They just rotated around like a. It's like.
The music's going. He just span around and he was gone.
He's gone. The seat continued, came back round. He was nowhere to be seen. I walked out with my 5 Ugandan glodge and was happy for the experience. Made me the man I am today.
I'll never forget his shrill laugh.
As he span round in an egg.
On that bombshell, yeah. Wow. Okay.
There you go. There's an image for you. As ever, you've been listening to Zapped to the Past, and I've been Adrian Mills,
and I've been Graham Traumatized Raddings,
and we will be. We'll see you again next week, where we will continue to roll balls into holes and hopefully make the horses move along. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Zapped to the Past podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Commodore 64 games, as well as the music, films and TV from around the 1980s, driven, of course, by the issue of Zap 64 magazine published at that time. We will return with a whole new batch of games and stuff to talk about next week. Until then, if you want to listen to or download previous episodes of Zapped to the Past, and why wouldn't you, they can all be found on our website at zappedtothepast.com, as well as being available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, pretty much anywhere where we can upload them. By the way, we do always love to hear from our amazing listeners, so if you'd like to contact us about anything in the podcast or beyond, you can do so by emailing us at zappedtothepast@gmail.com. We're also active on Twitter under @ZapTother, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and most social media platforms. Just search for Zapped to the Past and you'll find us. Oh, and if you like the podcast and what we're doing, please do like, share, review, rate us. It really helps. Something, apparently. The Zapped to the Past podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings, and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 Studio. All opinions expressed are those of the writers, and while we indeed love Zap 64 magazine, the Zapped to the Past podcast is not affiliated with it in any way. Stay safe, see you next time, and remember, we play these games so you don't have to.